American TV series, starting to profit from young Sheldon. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 51, Hurting Each Other. Coach George has unilaterally started a Cold War to express his dissatisfaction with Grandma Connie. He used a magazine to cover his face, which clearly meant that he didn't want to see Grandma Connie again. However, George's childish behavior not only did not cause any trouble to Grandma Connie, but made her look like she was watching a good show. Grandma Connie was very happy that George was unhappy. However, children are very sensitive to the war between adults. Missy stopped playing around and sat back next to Mike, looking back and forth between George and Grandma Connie. Suddenly, she felt that she was not as happy as before. As for little Sheldon, he was looking at his parents with a thoughtful look and began to analyze the probability of their divorce in his heart. And little George, well, except for the nervous little George, he didn't notice the change in the atmosphere at home at all and was still watching TV seriously. On TV, the top 10 of the week had been broadcast and the league highlights were being broadcast at this moment. Mike had beads of sweat on his face and the clips of his interview were also spread to families in Texas in the form of highlights. As Jack said, Mike's handsome face attracted the attention of women as soon as he appeared on TV. Grandma Connie turned her head and took a look at Mike's still handsome face and suggested, "Mike, you should consider going to Hollywood. Your face is definitely a work of art." Mary and Missy nodded in agreement. In the eyes of women, rugby is hard, tiring and prone to injury, and it is not as decent and glorious as being a big star. However, Grandma Connie's words made George unwilling. As a rugby coach, he does not allow others to slander rugby. Head coach George curled his lips and retorted, "With Mike's talent, he can win everything on the rugby field. Why should he sell his face, be a vase, and please the audience?" In the eyes of Coach George, rugby symbolizes hard work, struggle, unity, and honor, which is much more decent than entertainment stars who only sell their faces to please the audience. Okay, Mike can make any choice. Grandma Connie stated the facts first, and then she deliberately provoked George, saying, "Unlike some people, they can only live as a football coach in a small place." George had also been glorious when he was young, and he was a professional football player for a while. After retiring, he even went to teach a university football team. It was just because of his personality that he couldn't stand the fact that the head coach of the university football team took bribes at that time, so he reported the other party. However, George didn't expect that his behavior of reporting would be considered a traitor by the team and the school, and he was expelled. Therefore, George's life can be described as ups and downs. However, facing Grandma Connie's provocation, George still didn't accept it in his heart. He said sarcastically, "Yes, I'm a loser, but I support my family with my own efforts. Unlike some people, they don't even care about their own daughters and only gamble every day." More than a decade ago, Grandma Connie did neglect to care about Mary because of her gambling addiction, which gave George the opportunity to contact her. George made it clear that he was accusing Grandma Connie of not being a qualified mother. Seeing that the fight between the two was about to escalate, Mike interrupted and said, "Okay, we're finished watching TV. It's time for us to eat." "Yes, eat," Mary echoed. George's words just now also reminded the housewife of some bad things in the past. However, deep down, she still loves her mother. So, she found an opportunity to quietly remind her husband, "George, you should say less." As the saying goes, food can soothe people's hearts the most. After the family came to the table and enjoyed the food, the atmosphere at home warmed up again. When the dinner was about to end, Mary also adjusted her mentality. She smiled and said, "Tomorrow is the day of the church picnic. There will be some small activities. We can just go and relax." The gathering organized by the church is more like a feedback to the believers. At that time, the believers can bring their families and go there for a tour at public expense. At this time, Mary mentioned this good thing, and she also wanted to ease the tense relationship between George and Grandma Connie. "I refuse. I don't want to stay with someone during the beautiful weekend." George said angrily. "Oh, that's a pity. Grandma will bring some delicious barbecue tomorrow. It seems that someone won't have a good time." Grandma Connie deliberately angered George. Then, without waiting for the other party to refute, she stood up and said goodbye with a smile. I'm full too." Mike also stood up and followed Grandma Connie. He felt that he needed to persuade her. Grandma Connie's behavior at this moment has caused trouble for the Cooper family. A correct version of the book in 1619. After the two left, Mary's face also turned cold. "George, can't you give in to Connie?" "How can I give in? It was obviously she who played tricks on me first." George became more and more angry as he thought about it. He slammed the knife and fork on the table and cursed. "It's all because of that damn barbecue." "Calm down, George, she is my mother after all." Mary saw her husband's rude behavior and got angry. "Yes, she is your mother, you are a family, and I'm an outsider." George vented his anger and stood up and left the table. Mary did not expect her husband to react so strongly. Looking at his back as he walked out, she showed a disappointed expression. "Mom," Missy asked carefully, "if you divorce George, can I live with you?" On the side, little Sheldon and little George also pricked up their ears. Mary looked at the reactions of the three children and realized that she had behaved a little badly just now. She suppressed her thoughts, forced a smile, and comforted them. "Don't worry, kids. Your father and I will not divorce. We just had a normal discussion." But the voices were a little loud. While Mary was comforting the three children, Mike was also persuading them. "Grandma Connie, you and George are a family, and your relationship should not continue to be so tense." Mike revealed, "You know, the conflict between you and George has affected the normal life of the Cooper family." Sheldon also thought that George would divorce Mary because of this. "Oh, really?" Grandma Connie frowned and thought for a while, then returned to normal and said, "George can't even handle family relationships well. I should consider whether to let Mary find another." "Connie," Mike interrupted her seriously to prevent her from continuing. "Okay, I'm kidding. Although George is not a good person, he is still qualified as a husband and father." Connie shrugged, indicating that she had no intention of destroying her daughter's marriage. Seeing that the other party's attitude softened, Mike also took the opportunity to suggest, "Then you see, can you give George the secret recipe of barbecue, which can ease your relationship?" Grandma Connie's secret barbecue is a lead. As long as she is willing, she can use the secret recipe of barbecue to bribe George. Chapter 52. Bet and Reconciliation. No. Private matters are private matters, and the barbecue secret recipe is a bet. When it comes to the barbecue secret recipe, Grandma Connie becomes serious. "There are still 2 days before the end of this week. Wish that little fat boy good luck." In terms of mentality, Grandma Connie is still looking down on George. Mother-in-law and son-in-law don't like each other. This is probably the case. Seeing that Mike seemed to want to persuade, the shrewd grandma continued, "I have something to do tomorrow. I will go to rest first. You should also rest early." The influence of the American church is very large. Mary and Grandma Connie will be responsible for the catering of the believers tomorrow, which is also an important and sacred matter. After saying that, Grandma Connie did not give Mike a chance to refute and hurried back to the room. Looking at the back of the other party leaving, Mike shook his head helplessly. He planned in his heart, otherwise he would write down the secret recipe himself and then send it to George's Grandma Connie. This should ease the conflict between the two. But in the end, Mike still rejected this idea. Not to mention that it is easy to be exposed. If you do this, you may also be in trouble if the matter is exposed. Alas, considering all the disadvantages, Mike sighed and lamented that he was a selfish person after all. He was not willing to do thankless things. As for George, he ignored Mary's objection, took 2 bottles of beer from the refrigerator, sat in the backyard recliner, and drank beer while enjoying the cool. However, the leisurely enjoyment in the past made him feel uncomfortable today. He was still thinking about the conflicts at home. In fact, he didn't want to quarrel with Connie and Mary, but he wanted to get the recognition and attention of his family too much. Damn barbecue. Thinking of the depression, George hammered the small table next to him. Amid the loud noise, George, who had not had anti-strike training for a long time, held his hands and blew cold air. There was a large red area where his palm and wrist connected. "George, what happened?" Mary, who was cleaning up the kitchen utensils in the kitchen, heard the sound and asked. "It's okay." George straightened the small table that was overturned by the hammer and responded to the other party. After setting the table, George threw the broken beer bottle that fell to the ground into the trash can. After being busy for a while, he lay down in the chair again. Then, he calmed down and could feel his wife's concern for him. He also realized that all the conflicts in the family were caused by that damn barbecue. By the way, barbecue. George had a flash of inspiration and thought of the secret recipe of barbecue. The more Grandma Connie didn't want to give it, the more George wanted to get the secret recipe. In the end, he decided to sneak into Grandma Connie's house and secretly find out the secret recipe. Thinking that this situation would definitely make Connie angry, George couldn't help but smile. While it was not dark yet, George came to the door of Grandma Connie's house. Seeing that the lights in the hall of Connie's house were dim, he tried to knock on the door gently. Sure enough, no one responded. This is exactly what George wanted. He skillfully took out the spare key from under the carpet at the door and poked his head into the house. Then, he went to the kitchen of Connie's grandmother's house in the dark. "Karen, are you free tomorrow?" Mike was calling Karen in the private room. In order to facilitate communication, Mike bought a mobile phone. This was not difficult for him who had some money. "I'm afraid not." Karen hesitated for a moment and continued. "Regina seems to have discovered something and is keeping a close eye on her. Tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, the Devil Body group will have activities. Okay, let's make an appointment when we are free." With the sound of flying kisses on the phone, Mike hung up the phone. Karen is a good girl who knows when to advance and retreat and is not clingy, which is good. Just as Mike was about to rest, he suddenly heard a subtle sound outside. There was a thief. This was Mike's first reaction. Then, he picked up a wooden stick from the door, carefully pushed the door open, and followed the sound to the kitchen. In the dim light, he could see a fat back rummaging on the kitchen table. With his familiarity with George, Mike recognized him at once. "George, what are you doing?" Mike turned on the light and asked. I. George covered his face with his hands and explained hesitantly, "I came to find coffee." "Yes, there is no coffee at home." George saw the coffee powder on the table from the corner of his eye and picked it up. "Really?" Mike asked with a smile. "Yes, that's it," George said with a panic expression. "Okay, I got the coffee, and I should go too. By the way, don't tell Connie that I was here," George begged before leaving. He realized that his clumsy performance might not fool Mike at all. "Well, I know." Mike smiled. Even if the other party didn't say it, he would not tell Grandma Connie about it. Although it was a bit despicable to do so, Mike still hoped that George could win the bet. Read the correct version in the 16:9 book forum. However, when Mike sent George out, he turned around and saw Grandma Connie leaning against the doorframe in the corridor, looking at this side with a smile. Mike was too familiar with this scene. He just looked at George in the same way. "Grandma Connie, why aren't you asleep yet?" Mike blocked Connie's gaze with his body and made small talk. "That was George just now. What is he doing here?" Grandma Connie asked without buying it. "Well, it was George indeed," Mike explained. "He ran out of coffee at home, so he came to get some." "I'm afraid it's not that simple." Grandma Connie's eyes revealed a curious look. Then, she went to the kitchen and straightened her small box for storing menus. "Is he looking for this?" Grandma Connie took out a menu from her collar. Judging from the situation, the shrewd Grandma Connie had already thought that George would come to the house to steal the secret recipe, so she didn't put the barbecue secret recipe in the kitchen at all. Well, George did want to come to find the secret recipe, but I think his behavior is understandable. Mike didn't insist and chose to show his cards. "So, what about the bet?" Grandma Connie asked with a smile. "You win." Mike was willing to accept the loss. He was thinking in his heart whether he should tell the other party about his love life honestly. After all, it was a bit difficult for Mike to talk about such private matters. "Okay, go back and have a rest." Grandma Connie enjoyed the process of the bet and did not force Mike to ask about his private life. Mike, who was relieved, still said one more sentence. "I think you can think about the secret recipe of barbecue." "Well, I know," Grandma Connie replied, and her eyes became deep as she looked out the door. George, who failed to steal the secret recipe, took another bottle of beer from the refrigerator and went to the backyard. Just as he was drinking alone, Grandma Connie came over with 2 bottles of beer. "Here." Grandma Connie handed a bottle of beer to George. "Even if you hand me a beer, I won't like you." George took the beer and told the truth. "What about this?" Grandma Connie smiled and took out a secret recipe from her collar. To put it bluntly, there was no big conflict between the two of them. And, after all, they are a family. After George confirmed that the secret recipe was real, all his previous resentment was relieved at this moment. Then he stood up and hugged Grandma Connie. Chapter 53 Picnic. The next morning, when Mike walked out of the room, he saw George in the hall, fiddling with beef. Grandma Connie was holding a glass of wine, watching from the side. "What's going on?" Mike wondered. The two looked like they didn't like each other yesterday, but now they seemed to be on good terms. Mike walked over and asked in a low voice, "Grandma Connie, did you give the secret recipe to George?" Grandma Connie nodded. Seeing the smile on George's face, she said TSK unhappily again, and said in a low voice, "What a fool who is easily satisfied." It can be seen that Grandma Connie still looks down on her son-in-law, but she has learned to hide this emotion so that the other party will not find out. Mike looked at George, who was laughing foolishly, and shook his head. In terms of scheming, George is still several streets behind Grandma Connie. However, who made George get Mary without the consent of his mother-in-law? Now this kind of treatment is also what he deserves. George, who was busy, looked up and saw Mike. He smiled and said, "Mike, you are in for a treat today. I will make the most authentic Texas secret barbecue." From the way George stroked the beef, he was in a good mood. "Okay, I will taste it carefully then." Mike smiled and responded without saying anything to spoil the mood. Then, he went to the bathroom. When Mike finished washing up and changed into a refreshing summer outfit, when he came to the living room again, George had already marinated the beef that needed to be grilled. A whole portion of beef, about 10 pounds, was neatly placed in a transparent box, which looked very professional. "Okay, we can set off." George picked up the box with satisfaction. He couldn't wait to make the barbecue immediately and let everyone taste his craftsmanship. "Wait." Grandma Connie put down the wine glass, walked quickly to the coat rack, took down a wide-brimmed hat and a pair of sunglasses from it, put them on, turned around and asked, "How is it?" It was September now, and the hottest weather had not yet passed. Although Grandma Connie is old, she still pays great attention to maintenance. Her current dress is not only fashionable, but also protects her from being sunburned by the scorching sun. "Very beautiful," Mike praised sincerely. George, who was standing by, looked at his mother-in-law's exaggerated dress, secretly rolled his eyes, and didn't say anything. "Thank you," Grandma Connie responded to Mike with a smile, then put away her smile and said to George, "We can go." Today's picnic was initiated by the church, and Pastor Jeff had already informed everyone of the location in advance. The location is a farm more than 10 kilometers outside the town. This distance is not too close or too far, just enough to satisfy the curiosity of the believers for a picnic without making everyone tired. At the door of Cooper's house, George put the marinated beef in the trunk of the car and shouted to the house, "Mary, let the children come out, we should set off." Right away, Mary's anxious voice came from the house. "Shelly, hurry up." Then, a burst of ding ding dong dong overturning sounds came from the house. Obviously, it is not that easy to take care of 3 children. After a long time, Mary came out with Missy and George. Because Pastor Jeff asked her to take charge of everyone's meals, Mary carried a lot of kitchen utensils and seasonings in her hands, which was a precaution. When Missy saw Mike, her eyes lit up, and she flew over like a spoiled child. "Mike, you look so handsome today." As mentioned earlier, children can best feel the changes in the family atmosphere. Last night, George, who got the barbecue secret recipe, did not quarrel with Mary again. Missy, who discovered this, naturally regained her former liveliness. Mike caught Missy, dragged her up, and turned her in the air twice, making the little girl laugh. Sure enough, a soft and cute little girl is much more likable than its undear and annoying brat. Of course, this case is limited to Missy and little Sheldon. After putting the little girl down with a smile, Mike deliberately teased, "Why, wasn't I handsome before?" Mike was wearing a hard white shirt today, looking both refreshing and handsome. But it is not entirely true that he is more handsome today. No, Mike, you are always handsome, Missy explained quickly, her face flushed. The anxious and urgent look of the little girl made Mike laugh again. Then, he stopped teasing her, thanked her, and praised her. "Missy, you are also very beautiful today." The little girl was wearing a pink floral dress today, and a butterfly hairpin on her head. The butterfly wings would flutter slightly when she walked. This outfit made her look more lovely, just like a little flower fairy. "Really?" Missy was praised, and turned around twice happily, showing her cuteness. Then, she put away her cheerful expression, squatted like a lady, and said softly, "Thank you." On the 16:9 book forum, there is no wrong version. On the other side, George helped Mary put away the kitchen utensils and looked around. "Where is Shelley? Why hasn't she come out yet?" Before Mary could explain, a figure wearing a small spacesuit slowly walked out of the house. Little Sheldon looked at everyone and said, "I hope I'm not late. Okay, we can go." Seeing little Sheldon's weird outfit, Mary's anger climbed up again. "Shelley, didn't I prepare clothes for you? What's wrong with you?" Facing his mother's roar, little Sheldon took off the resin helmet on his head, breathed 2 breaths of fresh air, and explained seriously, "The wild is too dangerous. There are all kinds of animals, fungi, bacteria, viruses. The clothes you prepared for me can't protect me at all. Fortunately, I prepared protective clothing myself, which can protect me from the outside world." As he said, little Sheldon gestured at the small spacesuit on his body, with a proud look. "Come and praise me." Little Sheldon hates animals. Even a chicken can make him feel uncomfortable. Therefore, going to a picnic is a difficult test for him. However, whether the equipment that little Sheldon is wearing can protect his health is not discussed for the time being. But in the September weather, wearing such a heavy and airtight spacesuit and going out for a day will definitely cause heat stroke due to the stuffiness. "Haha, little cookie, aren't you hot?" Grandma Connie looked at little Sheldon's bulky clothes and laughed happily. "Not really." Little Sheldon wiped the sweat from his forehead and said stubbornly. Mary went over to measure the temperature of her son's forehead and exclaimed, "God bless you, you are almost getting a heat stroke. Go back and change your clothes." Between heat stroke and being invaded by bacteria, little Sheldon would rather choose the former. He still stood there stubbornly, and his feet just refused to move. "Go," George scolded with a cold face. At home, although Mary looked more severe, in little Sheldon's heart, he was actually more afraid of George. Hearing the other party's scolding, little Sheldon looked at Grandma Connie for help. This time, Grandma Connie just shook her head slightly, indicating that she could not help her little cookie. In this case, little Sheldon could only walk towards the house honestly. In order to be sure, Mary also went back to the house. Chapter 54, Acquaintance. Seeing that little Sheldon had delayed everyone's schedule again for personal reasons, little George said dissatisfiedly, "What a troublemaker." His voice was very low, but George still heard it. "You are not allowed to say that about your brother." Little George turned his head to the side rebelliously and continued to express his dissatisfaction. After a while, under Mary's urging, little Sheldon changed into a plaid shirt again and walked out wearing his own little bow tie. Then a total of 7 people, sitting into small cars, drove to the farm outside the town. In order to express his dissatisfaction, little George did not take George's private car, but sat in the passenger seat of Grandma Connie. As for Missy, in order to stay with Mike for a while longer, she also chose Grandma Connie's car. Along the way, compared to the coldness on George's side, Grandma Connie's side was much more lively. Grandma Connie enjoyed the family outing very much. She pushed the music in the car and asked, "Does anyone want to listen to music?" Me. Little George in the front row raised his hand in cooperation, and then he found a rock and roll tape among a pile of tapes. After a while, the music with a strong sense of rhythm sounded in the car. Several people in the car also swayed wildly to the music on the bumpy dirt road. The cheerful atmosphere continued to spread. After the car left the main road, Mike felt that the scene in front of him was becoming more and more familiar. This road was the road to Lina's house. Mike had walked it once. Sure enough, not long after, the car arrived at Lina's door. However, this was not the end. The two cars went along the path for a few kilometers and came to an originally ecological farm. There were green lawns and lush trees here, and even the air was fresher than in the town. Further away, you can see cattle walking halfway up the mountain. At this moment, many private cars have been parked at the door of the farm. It seems that someone came earlier than the Cooper family. Mike got out of the car and stretched his muscles, then helped Mary take the kitchen utensils and walked towards the farm gate. Welcome. A beautiful girl walked out of the farm. Why are you here? Mike was surprised to see the girl, but he had some guesses in his mind. Lina was also surprised to meet an acquaintance here. Then, she happily came to greet him. The girl was wearing a blue and white plaid shirt with slim jeans and a dark purple headscarf on her head. She looked like a hard-working country girl. This is my family's farm, I told you before. Lina came to Mike and explained. It turned out that the church held a picnic today, and the location chosen was Lina's farm. Looking at the herd of cattle on the hillside, Mike was sure of one thing. Lina was definitely a small rich woman. Here, after Lina briefly explained the situation at home, she asked in surprise, Mike, why are you here? That's not what I meant. It's just, today's picnic was initiated by the church, so most of the people who came were Christians. As far as Lina knew, Mike was not religious. I understand what you mean. Mike said, I'm here with the Cooper family. Then, Mike introduced the Cooper family to Lina. After knowing that Lina's mother was also a devout Christian, Mary felt more friendly to this beautiful girl. So, the two chatted for a few more words at the door of the farm. In just a short while, several people who came to the party came to the outside of the farm. Seeing this situation, Lina knew that this was not the place to chat. What's more, she actually wanted to be alone with Mike instead of chatting with Mary. Sorry, I still have work to do. Lina apologized to Mary, who was in the middle of chatting. Then, she gathered the people who came at the door together and led everyone to the farm. Because the church chose Lina's farm to hold a picnic, most of the ingredients will be purchased directly from the farm. So, Lina's work today is not easy. Not only does she have to receive everyone, but she will also have to help her parents prepare ingredients in a while. Grandma Connie looked at the capable girl leading the way in front of her and said jokingly, Mike, why don't I have any impression of this girl? Shouldn't you tell me something? The shrewd grandma guessed from the look in Lina's eyes when she looked at Mike that there might be something fishy going on between the two young people. Can I not tell you? Mike shook his head to refuse. Forget it, it's boring. Grandma Connie put away her bad taste and didn't ask any more questions. As Lina led the way, everyone climbed over a small hill and came to an open grassland. The green plants here still retain the flavor of the original ecology. The lush grass is dotted with various wildflowers, and butterflies and bees are flying freely among them. The beauty of nature is nothing more than this. Missy saw this beautiful scenery and ran over happily. After a while, she chased the beautiful butterflies. It can be seen that the church has done its best for this picnic. The flat grassland can be used for playing, and the small hill with dense trees next to it can be used for cooling off. At this moment, in the shade of the hill, someone has already set up a camp. Today's activities are arranged. In the morning, everyone can set up the camp and prepare food. At noon, it is time to enjoy food and pay attention. Check out the correct version in the 16:9 book forum. In the afternoon, when the weather is a little cooler, it is time for everyone to play small games. After Lina brought everyone to the gathering place, she came to Mike and whispered, Mike, I will come to play with you when I'm done. After saying that, she also winked playfully, with obvious teasing. Mike was infected by the girl's emotions and nodded readily, and then asked one more question. Do you need my help? Lina hesitated for a moment and refused. No, I can do it myself. Because of Regina's mischief last time, Lina's mother watched her very closely. So, in this situation, Lina didn't dare to let Mike appear in front of her mother. Seeing the girl's embarrassment, Mike said kindly, okay, you go ahead and do your work. If you need anything, come to me anytime. Then, Mary came over from the side. When she learned that Lina was going to prepare the ingredients, she immediately stated her identity as a chef and said that she could help. On the other side, George also found a barbecue grill in the camp, so he immediately went over to tinker with it. Although Mary is the chef today, she is not the only chef. Many housewives will help her prepare lunch. Moreover, many people, like George, will bring their own special delicacies to share with everyone. It can be said that the theme of today is leisure and comfort. When it was almost noon, George finally put the beef marinated by himself on the barbecue grill. Mary, with the help of a group of housewives, started to cook lunch. Lina, who had prepared the ingredients, was also free. She found an opportunity to avoid her mother's eyes and ears and took Mike to the grove to exchange feelings. Charm attribute plus 18, flexibility attribute plus 10, physique attribute plus 3, dancing experience plus 100. Another treasure girl. An hour later, Lina, who had calmed down, walked out of the woods with Mike. Outside the camp, a series of delicious dishes were placed on the long table like a buffet. There were more than 100 people at this picnic party, and because many people brought their children, the number of children accounted for 1/3. A group of people gathered around the long table, and the atmosphere was very harmonious. "What did you do just now? Why didn't I see you?" Missy stared at Mike suspiciously and asked, "Also, why are you sweating so much?" "It's too hot. I went to the woods to hide for a while." Mike pulled the collar of his shirt to let in the air while explaining, without any guilty look. "Really?" Missy sniffed the unique fragrance in the air, still a little suspicious. Just then, a red sports car, with a roar, took a long detour to the dinner venue. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 55, Alert. Pastor Jeff, accompanied by his wife, got out of the red sports car and greeted everyone with a smile. Compared to Pastor Jeff's enthusiasm, Serena next to him seemed much more cold. Her eyes without any emotion gave people a strong sense of distance. Today, Serena was still wearing a red high-slit tight-fitting long dress, a red wide-brimmed hat, and a black veil on her face. Her beauty revealed a hint of elegance. Compared with the women present, Serena was more like a lady from a big city. Seeing the two people walking hand in hand, Mary sighed. "They look so loving." George, who was on the side, saw this and complained sourly, "Pastor Jeff looks more like a butler than a husband." Jeff, who already looked ordinary, looked even more ordinary and humble against the backdrop of his beautiful wife. What George wanted to express was that Pastor Jeff and his wife were not a good match at all. Of course, it is unknown whether there is jealousy and envy among men. George is a devout believer. Mary stopped her husband's nonsense to Pastor Jeff in time. When George was annoyed, Grandma Connie nodded at him and encouraged him in a low voice. "George, this time, I agree with your opinion." This is the first time that the two have reached a consensus on the same thing. Not long after, Pastor Jeff took his wife's hand and sat in the main seat. With the arrival of the premeal prayer time, everyone held hands and closed their eyes. During the prayer, Pastor Jeff first thanked everyone for coming, and then thanked Mary for preparing food for everyone. Finally, he did not forget to mention the credit of Lina's family for providing the venue for everyone. From this, it can be seen that Pastor Jeff is a very gentle person. During the long prayer time, Mike always felt that someone was staring at him. Then, he suddenly opened his eyes and met a pair of greedy eyes head on. Serena, who was sitting opposite, was not embarrassed when she was caught peeping. The corners of her mouth slightly raised, and she drew a charming smile. This kind of invisible teasing can most arouse people's hearts. However, this beautiful woman has never given Mike a good impression. Last time at the door of Cooper's house, Mike found that she was observing him intentionally or unintentionally. It was a look of looking at prey. In addition, Mike could feel that Pastor Jeff's wife was definitely not as simple as she seemed on the surface. This also made Mike label her as troublesome and dangerous. After some thought, Facing Serena's gaze, Mike nodded politely, trying not to cause the other party's disgust. Then, he turned his head to the side naturally. The attitude was clear, that is, well water does not interfere with river water. At this time, accompanied by the sound of Amen, Pastor Jeff's prayer before the meal ended. Because of the children, the dining atmosphere was very lively. At this time, George also carried his special secret barbecue and promoted it to everyone around the table, and then received praise from others. Mike, who was eating the food in front of him, would always unconsciously glance at the opposite side with his peripheral vision under the prompt of his vigilance. After careful observation, Mike found that the elegant Serena opposite would taste the drink in front of her from time to time, but did not touch the food on the plate. This strange behavior also made Mike more certain that the other party was definitely not an ordinary person. As time went on, the banquet was coming to an end. Little George, who was eating greasy food, squeezed next to Mike and whispered, "Mike, there are several beautiful girls over there. How about we go over and talk to them later?" As the saying goes, when you are full and warm, you will think of your desires. Because of Mike's outstanding appearance, on one side of the table, several girls full of youthful vitality were also looking over here, and they seemed to be discussing something with each other. When Mike looked over, those girls all lowered their heads shyly and became timid quails. To be honest, these girls can be considered cute, and they are young. But compared with Karen and Lina and others, they are still far behind. Mike was in a state of emptiness, without any thoughts. He refused. "No, go by yourself. I'm going to take a nap later." "No, I'm a little scared without you." Little George said what was in his heart. He was in adolescence, and his ideas might be bold, but when it came to actual actions, he was very cowardly. Seeing the look on little George's face, Mike smiled and joked, "Are you sure you can still date a girl if you go with me?" Little George then realized that, if he acted with such a handsome guy like Mike, he would definitely have no chance at all. He accepted the reality and said helplessly, "Okay, I'll go by myself." Next, in order to ensure the success rate of the action, little George humbly asked Mike for some tips on dating girls, and then he walked towards the girls excitedly. Read the correct version in 1619 book bar. Missy, who witnessed the whole teaching process, questioned, "Mike, is the method you taught George really useful?" "No," Mike confessed, "I just use this method to build up some confidence for him. Whether he can date a girl next time depends on his own performance." Mike knew very well that he could please girls with his face. As for the dating skills, what are they? Seeing Mike's unreliable appearance, Missy mourned for George for 3 seconds. Then, as a little kid, she was happy that Mike didn't go to find a girl. "Okay, you go and play. I'm going to find a place to rest." Mike rubbed the little girl's hair, then found a wet blanket and went to the shade on the side of the hill. After lunch, many people, like Mike, found a quiet and cool place to take a nap. Of course, there were also many people who gathered in groups of 3 or 5, drinking beer, chatting, and exchanging feelings. On the side of the hillside, accompanied by the chirping of insects and birds and the breeze blowing from the mountains, Mike soon fell asleep comfortably. But after a while, he was awakened by the itchy feeling on his face. When he opened his eyes, he saw Missy squatting beside him, holding a small grass spike in her hand. Seeing Mike wake up, Missy quickly hid her hands behind her back and showed a cute smile. "Mike, don't sleep, come and play with me." This is a bad thing about children. They always seem to be very energetic at special times. "Don't make trouble, let me rest for a while. I will play with you in the afternoon, okay?" Mike said in a coaxing tone. Seeing that Mike was really not in the mood to play, Missy said tactfully, "Okay, remember to play with me in the afternoon." Then, after getting Mike's assurance, Missy went somewhere else with satisfaction and played with other children first. Here, Mike turned over and fell asleep again. I don't know how long it took. Mike was awakened by a faint smell. "Missy, stop making trouble." Mike, who had just woken up, hadn't thought about it yet. He thought it was Missy again, catching a bedbug to play a trick on him. However, when he waved his hand to drive it away, his fingers touched the smooth silk. This feeling was not right. Mike opened his eyes and saw Serena squatting beside him, looking down at him. This woman, with a tight high-slit red skirt, outlined a perfect curve. The white shoulders and low neckline design made the central canyon unobstructed. Of course, these beautiful scenes were completely ruined by the lingering stench in his nose. Mike sat up quickly, leaned back slightly, and put on an innocent look on his face. "Ma'am, what's the matter?" At this time, he was secretly sighing in his heart. Sure enough, this woman has set her eyes on him. Chapter 56 Temptation. Mike discovered that this woman had not taken off her huge brimmed hat since she arrived, whether it was during mealtime or rest time. The whole person was always shrouded in a shadow, which was extremely strange. Selena looked at Mike's handsome face and seemed very satisfied. She introduced herself solemnly. "My name is Selena, and I'm a member of the Vulturi family." The Vulturi family is equivalent to the royal family among vampires. Compared with the name of vampires, they prefer to call themselves Blood Clan. Because of the peace agreement reached with humans, the Blood Clan is limited to Washington State and Oregon, two remote states in the northwest corner of the United States. As compensation for being imprisoned, as long as the Blood Clan lives in those two states and does not take the initiative to cause trouble, no one will bother them. Under such circumstances, a group of vegetarians gradually developed among the Blood Clan. They are close to humans and no longer suck human blood. Instead, they choose animal blood to maintain basic energy supply. Because of their long lifespan and ageless appearance, those vegetarian vampires who have a good impression of humans will actively integrate into local life and even join local high schools and universities as students to learn human knowledge. This way, they can live a more fulfilling life. Of course, in addition to the moderates, there are also radicals among the vampires. Selena, who is more than 200 years old, is a vampire who is dissatisfied with her fate of being imprisoned. She yearns for freedom. This time, after she escaped from Washington State privately, she went all the way east to the most prosperous Big Apple city in the United States. And then, nothing happened. The power of the church made this vampire royal family see the cruelty of reality. The mysterious power of the church and even the technological power of humans can make the ancient race of vampires be destroyed several times in minutes. Selena, who went to the Big Apple City, was targeted by the local church before she could be free for a few days. After some contact, Selena escaped with her super physique and her natural charm talent when her opponent was careless. Then, Selena, who did not dare to stay in the bustling big city for too long, thought of taking a detour back to Washington State. Only there can vampires survive. As for Texas, which is vast and sparsely populated, it was the escape route that Selena had planned for herself. Originally, with the cover of Pastor Jeff, she only planned to stay in the small town of Telford for a few days before leaving. However, life is full of surprises. At this time, Selena met the handsome Mike. If the vampires have no goals in their long life, they will be very boring. At this moment, Selena regarded Mike as her goal, and she wanted to take him back to Forks, a small town in Washington State. Although Mike did not know what the woman opposite was thinking, the rotten smell on her body was enough to make him feel uncomfortable. So, facing the woman's self-introduction, Mike just nodded perfunctorily and acted very coldly. "I went to watch your match on Monday. You are already very good among humans." Serena seemed not to notice the boy's resistance and was still looking for a topic. "Thank you." Mike's eyes flashed, and he responded perfunctorily again. On the other side, Pastor Jeff was drinking with George, enjoying the rare leisure time. This party cost a lot of money, right? George lay on the grass, took a sip of iced beer, and chatted casually. "Of course, this is a big party after all." Pastor Jeff smiled and shook his head, thankful, but fortunately, the church will reimburse me for this money when the time comes. The church is a semi-charitable organization. Even Jeff, a church pastor, does not have much personal salary every month. The income of churches in various places mainly depends on donations from local believers. In the small place of Telford City, the little money donated by believers is just enough to maintain the operation of the church. It is impossible to hold a large party. George is not a Christian and does not know the strangeness. Faced with Pastor Jeff's answer, he could not respond. The scene was quiet for a while. Perhaps feeling awkward, Pastor Jeff took out a credit card and started looking for a topic. "Look, what is this? Are you showing off your wealth to me? George joked with a smile. No, no, no. Pastor Jeff shook his head, looked around to see that there was no one around, and then explained in a low voice, I stole this from Selena. Hearing the gossip between Pastor Jeff and his wife, George became interested. Why? Well, I mean, it's good to let your wife control the finances after marriage. Why did you steal the card back? You don't understand. Pastor Jeff said in embarrassment. Since Selena took my credit card, my monthly bank statements and various luxury goods tax returns have filled my mailbox. Don't look at me like this now. I actually owe the bank a lot of money. Wow, this is big news. Sure enough, Pastor Jeff was not as happy as he seemed, and Mary's guess was wrong. George was secretly delighted. Then, he suppressed his smile and persuaded, since your financial conditions do not allow it, why don't you confess to your wife? The most important thing between husband and wife is mutual understanding. How could Pastor Jeff not know this truth? He said bitterly, I want to do this too, but when I first met Serena, I hinted to her that my family is very rich. Men care most about face. Check out the correct version in 1619 book bar. Pastor Jeff's current situation is that he is still trying to be rich. Okay. George expressed sympathy for Pastor Jeff's situation. He continued to persuade, I still think that you should confess to your wife earlier. No matter what the result is, at least it will make your life a little better in the future. I can't do that. Pastor Jeff hesitated for a while and explained, in fact, except for her love of spending money, Serena is fine in other aspects. In particular, her temperament is so perfect. It seems that Pastor Jeff has been deeply fascinated by Serena. In George's opinion, Pastor Jeff is too ordinary and does not match his beautiful wife at all. So much so that George was puzzled as to why Serena chose to marry Jeff. On the other side, on the shady side of the hill, Serena brought up a few more topics, but Mike was still not interested. At this moment, she finally realized that the other party was perfunctory. Looking at Mike's handsome face again, Serena suppressed her anger and chose to show her cards. Mike, do you want to have a stronger body and a longer life? As long as you nod, you can get all of this easily. Serena will not stay in the small town of Telford for too long, and she needs to deal with Mike quickly. This is going to use force. Mike looked at the other party's greedy expression and realized that the situation was not right. Why not stabilize the other party first and find an opportunity to backstab him again? Mike thought in his heart. He had done this kind of thing once, so he had some experience. Just when Mike was thinking about retreating, George came over. He shouted carelessly, Hi, Mike. So you are here. The three-way activity has begun. We can go and defeat Sheldon. Done. When he saw the beautiful Serena was also here, the words he was about to say were stuck in his throat. Sorry, I didn't know you had other activities. Little George changed the subject abruptly and winked at Mike. At the same time, he was also envious of Mike's popularity with women. You came at the right time. I promised Missy to attend the event together. If you hadn't reminded me, I'm afraid I would have missed the time. Mike got up and put away the blanket and then said to Serena, who was waiting for an answer on the side, I have something else to do, so excuse me. It doesn't matter. Serena regained her cold expression and reminded him, you can think about what I said before seriously. If you figure it out, come to me anytime. Mike pretended not to understand and didn't respond. He called little George and walked towards the venue. Looking at Mike's hurried escape, Serena licked her red lips. At this moment, she was still full of confidence in her plan, because she knew clearly that no mortal could resist the temptation of immortality. Chapter 57 Games. Along the way, George held it in for a long time, but finally asked, Mike, what happened just now, you and that woman? As he said that, George showed a lewd smile on his face, which all men understand. Don't ask about Serena's affairs, and don't be curious. This is for your own good. Mike warned seriously. I know. George thought Mike wanted to play something exciting, and the smile on his face became more lewd. Then, he kindly reminded, Mike, you know that she is Pastor Jeff's wife. Are you? What are you thinking about? Mike turned his head and glared at him fiercely. Do you think I look like that kind of person? George looked at Mike's handsome face, nodded first, and then shook his head quickly. Mike looked at the other party's funny look, and didn't say much. After all, for ordinary people, the more they know about Serena's affairs, the more dangerous it is. However, George was quiet for a while, then changed the topic and complained, "Mike, the dating skills you taught me before are useless. Especially after I told them to drink more hot water, those girls ignored me." Mike, who was originally in a heavy mood, almost laughed out loud after hearing what George said. It was too rude to do this. So, Mike suppressed his laughter, patted the other person on the shoulder, and said, "Have you heard of this saying, failure is the mother of success? Don't worry, you are so good, failure once is nothing. There will be plenty of opportunities in the future." Hearing Mike's praise, George agreed very much. "You are right." Then, he said unconfidently, "I think girls are too difficult to understand. How about you give me a reference for a suitable target?" Mike turned his head and looked George up and down. It was difficult to find any advantages in George except his honesty. So Mike said casually, "Next time, we will talk about it when we have a chance." The two chatted all the way and came to the event venue. The grass was divided into several open spaces. Some were for playing ring toss, some were for fishing with empty bottles, and in the middle, the game of three-legged race was being played. Parents accompanied their children in most of these activities. The prizes were small crosses, provided by the church. Little Sheldon and Missy, accompanied by 3 elders, stood at the starting line of the game of three-legged race. The game of three-legged race refers to 2 people having one foot tied together. In this state, they rushed from the starting line to the finish line. This game is a test of the tacit understanding between the players. However, at the starting line, little Sheldon was complaining that there were too many bugs in the grass, which made him very uncomfortable. Missy was looking around all the time. When she saw Mike coming over, she asked happily, "Mom, I don't want to be in the same group with Sheldon. Can I work with Mike?" "No." Mary refused immediately. Then she saw her daughter's unhappy expression and patiently explained, "Mike's legs are too long. If you team up with him, you will only be dragged. Do you want that?" Thinking of that funny scene, Missy quickly shook her head and forgot the bad picture. At the same time, she swore in her heart, "I must grow up to be a long-legged beauty in the future." After seeing the Cooper family, Mike went over to meet them. On the other side, little George saw that little Sheldon had not set off yet and said excitedly, "Mike, hurry up, let's participate in this competition too." Little George had a rare opportunity to defeat little Sheldon head on, and he was very active. He looked at little Sheldon, who was not in the state, and was reluctant to participate in the event. Mike said, "If we participate, isn't it too bullying for children?" "It's okay, look over there," little George said indifferently. Looking in the direction he pointed, Mike found that there were indeed some older children preparing for the race around the starting line. It turned out that the small activities held by the church focused on a sense of participation. So, at the strong request of George, Mike finally signed up for the 2-person 3-legged game. As the starting gun sounded, Mike, who was tall and long-legged, quickly adapted to George's pace. This was not difficult for Mike. Soon, the two tacitly surpassed other competitors and approached the finish line 100 meters away. Just when the two were 10 meters away from the finish line, there was a sudden exclamation behind them, accompanied by the laughter of parents beside the stadium. Mike wanted to look back to see what happened, but he found that George next to him was full of desire for this victory. So Mike suppressed his curiosity and did not drag his partner down. A few seconds later, when the two crossed the finish line, Mike had time to look back. Outside the track, Sheldon was waving his arms in fear, and he was screaming unconsciously. There were 2 little bees flying around his head. Little Sheldon wanted to run away, but he was not as strong as Missy, so he was pulled to the spot. This funny scene can be said to be the social death moment of little Sheldon. The parents on the side were all amused by this funny scene, and among them, Grandma Connie laughed the loudest. Read the correct version in 1619 book bar. After Mary confirmed that her little son was not in danger, she urged with a smile, "George, come on, camera, take a picture of this scene. This will be an unforgettable moment." Finally, when little Sheldon was about to cry, Missy squatted down and untied the rope tied around her ankle with a look of disgust. Little Sheldon, who was free, used his hands and feet and ran around like crazy on the grass. Suddenly, a good-natured laugh rang out from the sidelines. In the end, it was Grandma Connie who went up and hugged her grandson and comforted him. "It's okay, little cookie, Grandma is here." The comforted little Sheldon was in a much better mood, but he was determined not to participate in the next game. Little George, who got a small cross, finally showed off in front of his brother for a while. Then, at the suggestion of Grandma Connie, Mike participated in the ring tossing and fishing competitions. With his extraordinary talent, Mike won 2 more small crosses before the end of the event. He gave the 2 crosses to little Sheldon and Missy respectively. In the evening, the happy Cooper family set off on their way home with satisfaction. In George's car, little Sheldon and Missy each held a small cross in their hands and slept soundly. Blowing the evening breeze, Mary looked at her husband driving by the side and sighed. "This day is so good indeed. There are not many opportunities to see Shelley make a fool of himself," George said in a sour tone. He took a lot of photos in his camera, including Grandma Connie, little George, Mike, etc., which are the most precious memories of the family. On Grandma Connie's side, George also fell asleep in the back seat. He smacked his lips from time to time, and he looked like he had a good dream. Grandma Connie, who was driving quietly, looked at Mike in the passenger seat and suddenly asked, "By the way, why didn't I see that girl named Lina this afternoon? Maybe she had something else to do." Mike said casually, but he knew in his heart that Lina didn't come to see him again in the afternoon. One reason was that she was probably tired at noon and needed to rest. Another reason was that she was afraid that her mother would find out. It must be said that Lina was also a good girl. Chapter 58, Danger Approaches. The next morning, it was church service time. Mike declined Mary's invitation again and stayed alone in the house to take a nap. Knock, knock. Unexpectedly, the other party would come to his door so anxiously. Mike leaned back slightly and asked alertly, "What's the matter, Serena? My water pipe is broken. Can you come over and help me fix it?" Serena fiddled with a few strands of wet hair. The silk pajamas on her chest were also wet and tightly attached to her body. If the other party was a normal person, Mike might have taken a few more glances to feast his eyes. But the strange smell wafting from the tip of his nose made Mike wrinkle his nose uncomfortably. Then, he declined. "This is not very convenient. Otherwise, you can go home and wait for a while. Pastor Jeff should be back soon." Before he figured out the other party's true and false, Mike didn't want to have too much contact with her. Mike, who had experienced the Jennifer incident, knew the dangers of those non-humans. Their brain circuits are completely different from those of humans. "Are you sure you don't want to go?" Serena's patience seemed to be exhausted in the face of Mike's refusal again. At this moment, although she still had a smile on her face, her hands on the door frame were making a clicking sound. The door frame, which was wrapped in a layer of iron sheet, was pinched with several finger marks. Comparing the fighting power of both sides, Mike knew that he was no match for the other party in a head-on confrontation. I'll go change my clothes and come out right away." Mike's eyelids twitched, and he chose to be timid first. It was just the right time to change clothes and find some life-saving tools. "No need." Selena instantly grabbed Mike, who wanted to turn around, and said with a smile, "It's just to fix the water pipe. It won't disturb you for too long." Mike was surprised in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. "Okay, I'll help you fix the water pipe. Can you let go first?" Mike looked at the little hand holding his wrist. The little hand was white and slender, but it was very cold, not like the temperature of a living person. "Sorry, I was too impatient." Selena let go of her hand and resumed her polite and cold attitude. Pastor Jeff's house was next door, less than 300 meters away. On the way, Mike moved his wrist, and a circle of red marks appeared where he was just grabbed. Trouble. Mike looked up and saw Serena, who was leading the way with her hips twisted, thinking about countermeasures. However, considering the difference in combat power between the two sides, Mike couldn't think of any good countermeasures for a while. Otherwise, ask the church for help. Just when Mike was thinking, the two entered Pastor Jeff's house. This is a very ordinary house, and the overall layout is similar to Connor's grandmother's house. It's here, you see if you can fix it first. I'll go change my clothes. Serena took Mike to the kitchen, and the faucet above the sink was dripping. Since entering the house, Serena seemed to have Mike in her hands, but she didn't show any anxiety. When the other party left, Mike looked at the various knives in the kitchen, and a hint of hostility appeared in his eyes. Just when he was thinking about the fish and the net, Serena changed into a red sling and came back. It must be said that this woman has a really good figure and understands men's habits very well. The slings on her body are wearing a taste of fun. It's a pity that the other party is not a human, otherwise it's not impossible. Mike shook his head and suppressed his inappropriate thoughts. At the same time, he stepped back slightly and approached the place where the knives were placed. "How is it? Can it be fixed?" Selena asked, half leaning against the door. Hearing this, Mike took a look at the faucet. It was just that the screws were loose. Moreover, he had reason to believe that the other party had loosened it deliberately. Looking at the small wrench and pliers placed next to him, Mike nodded. "It can be fixed." "That's good. You fix it first. I'll go get you something to drink." After saying that, Selena twisted her waist and went to the living room again. A perfect version in 1619 book bar. This is very abnormal. Mike looked at the other party's back, and some inappropriate pictures always rose in his mind. Logically speaking, just based on the unpleasant smell on the other party, Mike should not have any other ideas. But his brain was out of his control. Forget it. Without sufficient preparation, now is not the best time to take action. It's better to leave here quickly. Without a strong chance of winning, Mike didn't intend to put himself in danger. So, he picked up a small wrench and quickly repaired the faucet. After tightening the screws, the faucet stopped leaking. Mike put down the tools and walked out. In the living room, Selena was holding a goblet filled with red liquid, waiting for Mike. "There is no milk at home. How about red wine?" Selena asked with a smile. "No." Mike refused. He didn't dare to drink what the woman handed over. "The faucet has been fixed. I'll leave first." With that, Mike walked around the woman and was about to walk out the door. "Wait, aren't you curious about my ability?" Selena tasted the red wine, revealing two fangs in her mouth, and the color of her pupils turned blood red. "I'm not pretending anymore." Mike's heart sank, and he put his hand in his trouser pocket, where there was a knife for cutting vegetables. "Don't get excited. Actually, I have no ill will towards you." Selena licked her red lips and retracted her fangs. "I'm a noble vampire. If you are willing, I can give you the first embrace and let you join us." The first embrace ceremony of the vampires requires a vampire to voluntarily offer his or her blood essence, which will cause the vampires to lose some of their power. From this point of view, Selena is really concerned about Mike. And through the first embrace ceremony, humans who are transformed into vampires can not only gain a stronger physique and endless lifespan, if they are lucky, they can even awaken a unique talent. And Selena has awakened the charm talent. This talent allows Selena to magnify the desires of others, especially the things between men and women. Moreover, the pure vampires transformed through the first embrace can also strengthen themselves by absorbing the energy of the moonlight. In the end, maybe they can reach the point of anti-ancestor, transforming into bats, and have the ability to fly and hide. Chapter 59, Finding a Way to Cope. Although there are many benefits to becoming a vampire, Mike, who has the system, doesn't care about those benefits at all. He took 2 steps back, kept a vigilant posture, and said, "Thank you for your kindness. I'm not interested in becoming a vampire." Selena was a little surprised by this answer. Then, she threatened faintly, "Don't make a decision so quickly. Maybe you will regret it in the future. How about a week? I'll give you a week to consider it." Seeing that there was still room for turning around, Mike breathed a sigh of relief. "Okay, I'll give you an answer in a week." Mike said he planned to think of other ways to deal with Selena in a week. Things have come to this point. How bad can it be? Looking at Mike's back as he hurriedly left, Selena licked her red lips and whispered, "It's worthy of the man I like. He can resist my temptation." In fact, when she went to find Mike in the morning, Selena used her charm talent. Under such temptation, ordinary people would probably have become a puppet controlled by desire. And Selena was willing to give Mike a week, and it was not so kind. She had already decided that, if the other party could not give her a satisfactory answer after a week, she would not mind sucking the blood of the entire town. Selena had already enjoyed the deliciousness of blood in the Big Apple before. Those who were sucked dry by her, those who were unlucky turned directly into ashes, and those who were lucky would be infected with blood poison and become blood servants. Compared with pure blood races, blood servants not only have a long lifespan, but their physique is not even as good as that of ordinary people. Moreover, blood servants belong to a group that will die when exposed to light and can only live in darkness for the rest of their lives. Before, Selena did not suck the blood of the town residents because she was afraid that the church would discover her whereabouts. Now, she gave Mike the right to choose if the other party could not satisfy her. Naturally, she did not mind using the lives of the entire town as a punishment for Mike before leaving. As for killing Mike directly, Selena was a little reluctant because the other party had a handsome face. On the other side, Mike, walking on the road and bathing in the sun, finally felt a little better, and the awkward feeling in his mind before disappeared. Selena is actually a vampire. Mike, who has confirmed this fact, still feels a little unreal. While sighing at his good luck, he plans to go to the church to see if he can get some help there. After all, the church is a professional counterpart in dealing with vampires. The only church in the town is not far from Connor's grandma's house. At this moment, Pastor Jeff is reading the Bible in the church. Mike sneaked in through the gate and sat in the last row. He was waiting for the service to end before going to Pastor Jeff to ask about vampires. On the first day of creation, God said, "Let there be light." So there was light in the world. Pastor Jeff stood on the stage, preaching the greatness of God's creation. In the third row, little Sheldon was looking for loopholes in Pastor Jeff's words because of the unhappiness God brought him last time. When he heard Pastor Jeff mention light, he immediately raised his little hand. "Very good, Sheldon. Do you have any questions?" Pastor Jeff called little Sheldon, but under his smile, he revealed that he didn't want to do so. "Pastor Jeff, as far as I know, God created light on the fourth day." Little Sheldon asked, "Then was the world dark in the first 3 days?" "Probably not." Pastor Jeff tried to explain, "God will bring light to the world." "Very good, that means God is a ball of light." Little Sheldon continued. "Right, no, God is God, he is not anything." Pastor Jeff was almost led astray. In the hearts of believers, God is omnipresent, a kind of belief, and cannot be replaced by some kind of material. When it comes to physics, Pastor Jeff is obviously no match for little Sheldon. Seeing that Pastor Jeff was about to make a fool of himself, Grandma Connie said happily, "Oh, Jeff is going to be unlucky." Mary glared at her mother with dissatisfaction, then pulled little Sheldon and told him not to say anything more. However, Sheldon would never miss this opportunity. He changed the topic and continued to ask, "Pastor Jeff, I saw in the gospel that God loves the world. Does the world here refer to the people on Earth or the entire universe? Are the distant octopus star people included in the world?" Obviously, this time Sheldon did enough homework in advance to vent his anger. Faced with Sheldon's fallacies, Pastor Jeff thought for a while and said, "God is omnipotent, and of course he will protect the octopus star people, regardless of whether they recognize the existence of God." Here, Pastor Jeff implicitly pointed out the fact that Sheldon did not believe in God, and generously stated that God would still protect him. "Very good." Little Sheldon nodded and continued to question, "What image will God appear in front of the octopus people? After all, creatures with 8 claws will not like the image of humans with only 4 limbs. And, I want to know, does God speak the octopus language?" This, Pastor Jeff didn't dare to make up the image of God at will. With his head stuck, he could only stand there awkwardly. There were hundreds of believers in the church, some of whom looked at Pastor Jeff, waiting for his explanation. Others looked at the little Sheldon who had made the trouble, with unkind eyes. As a believer, Mary knew that the behavior of little Sheldon was already a blasphemy against God. She quickly pulled her husband's clothes and whispered, "Pretend to be sick, we need to leave here." A correct version in the 16:9 book forum. In this situation, if little Sheldon doesn't leave the church, he may be troubled by the believers. George understood, covered his chest in cooperation, and looked uncomfortable. "Oh, George, what's wrong with you?" Mary shouted exaggeratedly. "We need to go to the hospital." Then, she helped her husband out and kicked George, who was sleeping soundly and drooling. Grandma Connie saw that the situation was not good and woke up Missy, who was catching up on her sleep. Then, she pulled Missy and the very reluctant little Sheldon and followed Mary's pace. After the fuss was over, Pastor Jeff's mind was full of octopus, and he was not interested in reading the Bible. So, not long after the Cooper family left, this church service also ended hastily. After all the believers in the church left, Mike came up and said, "Pastor Jeff, I have something, and I need your help. If I remember correctly, you are Mike who is staying at Connie's house." Pastor Jeff recognized Mike and saw that he came to the church in pajamas. Pastor Jeff smiled and said, "I think God has felt your enthusiasm." Even though he knew that there were demons and vampires in the world, Mike still did not believe in God. But he didn't explain much, but asked directly, "Pastor Jeff, do you know that God has a way to deal with vampires?" Hearing this strange question again, the smile on Pastor Jeff's face rose. He patiently explained, "As far as I know, there are no vampires in the world." The other party really didn't know vampires. Mike was a little disappointed, but he continued, "Why not? Since you believe in the existence of God, then the corresponding demons should also exist, such as vampires." Okay. Pastor Jeff was confused, and he forced himself to say, "Even if demons exist, they should have been subdued by God. You don't have to worry." What if there are still some that have not been subdued? Mike said, "For example, if the vampires are mist, how will God deal with them?" Well, it should be holy water, or a branch that can be nailed through their hearts. Pastor Jeff said, "Then, can you give me some holy water, or a branch that can be nailed through vampires?" Mike asked. Pastor Jeff has never encountered such a strange request in his life. Moreover, this is too difficult for Pastor Jeff. He said, "I'm sorry, I don't have what you want." "Then can you please ask other people in the church if they have anything to deal with vampires?" Mike told him the purpose of his trip. Seeing the other party's hopeful look, Pastor Jeff thought it was ridiculous, but it was difficult to refuse, so he could only say, "Okay, I will call the bishop and let you know when there is a result." At the same time, in his heart, he was also ready to ask the bishop about the octopus star. Mike also told Pastor Jeff to ask his superiors as soon as possible, and then left the church. Chapter 60, fully prepared. Mike returned to the room alone and realized that all the fears came from insufficient firepower. When he was in a small town in Minnesota, Mike had played with a shotgun for a while in his own manner. The two-level shooting skills were enough for him to hit close-range targets. The problem now was where to find a large caliber firearm. Although the people in Texas are tough, not every family has guns. And because of the danger of guns, they are strictly controlled, and ordinary people can't get them at all. After thinking again and again, Mike called Lina. In Mike's opinion, Lina's family owns such a large ranch, and is most likely to have defensive weapons. Originally, he just wanted to test it out, but who knew that Lina would give Mike a surprise. Afternoon, when the weather was the hottest, a girl who was wrapped very tightly and carrying a long black bag found the door of Connor's grandmother's house and knocked on the door. "You are Lina." The door opened, and Grandma Connie recognized the identity of the beautiful girl in front of her. She invited her warmly, "Come in and sit down and take a rest." Lina was carrying dangerous goods, and she seemed very reserved in the face of Grandma Connie's enthusiasm, and her eyes kept looking back. She looked like a thief. Grandma Connie saw Lina's nervous look, and she said, "You are here to find Mike. I will go and call him." In Grandma Connie's opinion, the girl's strange dress and nervous expression must have meant that she ran away from home to have a tryst with Mike. With an aunt's smile, she showed that she had grasped the girl's mind. "Mike, come out quickly. Someone is looking for you." In the room, Mike also heard the movement at the door and came out. Seeing Mike, Lina's expression relaxed, as if she had found her backbone. Grandma Connie saw the changes in the girl's expression. She looked back and forth at the two young people in the room for several times. Then, she suddenly realized, oh, Grandma almost forgot that I have to go to the bowling alley today. Mike, I'll leave the house to you. As she said that, she picked up her sun hat and sunglasses from the coat rack, turned around and winked at Mike, and then left the house in a chic manner. Helena didn't breathe a sigh of relief until Grandma Connie disappeared. She was really too nervous. Then, she took off the long backpack from her back and unzipped it. Mike, I found what you want. It's hidden in my father's storage room. Lena's ranch actually doesn't need weapons. The double-barreled shotgun in the package has been gathering dust in the storage room for a long time. When Lena introduced the weapons, Mike took a few steps forward and hugged her from behind. He smelled the unique fragrance of the girl. That's right, compared to the stench on Serena, the fragrance on the girl at this moment is a real enjoyment for Mike. No, Mike. Lena said shyly, I have to go back quickly, otherwise it will be bad if my mother finds out that I sneaked out. Lena, you smell really good, Mike praised. At the same time, Lena resisted a little and finally chose to give in. No, here. Lena's soft voice sounded very comfortable. Okay, Mike hugged the girl and strode back to his room. Because of the rush, this time Lena was more proactive than yesterday. More than half an hour later, Lena wrapped herself tightly again and left Connor's grandmother's house. During the break, Mike merged the several light balls in his hand into his body. Then, he unexpectedly found an extra skill in the skill column of the system. Holy Spear LV1, 6600ths. Then, Mike, who had recovered, hurried to the living room and took the long package back to his room. The package contained an old double-barreled shotgun, which weighed less than 2 kilograms. The handle and rifling of the gun were slightly worn, but it did not affect its use. The caliber of 18mm is enough to show the power of this shotgun. I'm afraid that the most ferocious beasts may not be able to stop a round of its shooting. As the saying goes, in front of the gun, all beings are equal. After getting familiar with the weapon in his hand, Mike felt confident. If he had this thing in his hand before, he would not be afraid at all. Time flies, and it is Monday. Because of the arrangement of the inter-school football competition, the Melford Middle School football team needs to play away this time. With the farewell of school classmates, the football team members and cheerleading members got on the bus and embarked on the journey to other colleges. The correct version is in the 16-9 book and bar. The information collected by Coach George shows that, although the opponent in this round is a public middle school, its strength is not very strong. And for the sake of insurance, Coach George also arranged a dual core tactic before the game. The quarterback is the fortress and the running back is the spear. Mike's tactical position has been improved in this game. Of course, Mike did not disappoint George. With his excellent performance, he helped Melford Middle School win another big victory. In the next few days, the members of the football team who won 2 consecutive victories were warmly received by the whole school. Among them, because of Mike's handsome appearance and the improvement of his tactical status, a huge poster was even hung for him on campus. This was still on the surface. In private, I don't know how many girls were collecting candid photos of Mike in the game. And these photo bases were jointly launched by Mike and local reporter Jack. This behavior not only enriched Mike's wallet, but also made Jack earn a lot of extra money. It was a win-win situation. With this trend, the boys in the school, who didn't pay much attention to Mike before, would now come up to him enthusiastically when they saw Mike. For a time, Mike's popularity in the school reached its peak, surpassing the Queen Bee in the Devil Figure group, and becoming the most popular person in the whole school. This morning, Mike, who was training, found Coach George. Coach, I want to take a class, to go to the chemistry class. Mike said so. In fact, after Mike's physical fitness reached 160, the ordinary training intensity made it difficult for him to have a qualitative improvement. Instead of wasting time on the playground, Mike planned to go to the chemical laboratory to get some strong corrosive liquids such as strong sulfuric acid and hydrochloric acid to make aqua regia. Mike thought that corrosive physical attacks should give the vampire a surprise. In Coach George's opinion, Mike should now step up training to prepare for the 3-game winning streak next week. However, considering Mike's contribution to the team in the 2 games, Coach George chose to open a back door for him. After getting the coach's permission, Mike went to the locker room to change into regular clothes and went directly to the chemical laboratory. Chapter 61 Clearance. On the fourth day, God said, "Let there be lights in the sky to separate the day from the night, to mark seasons, days, and years, and to shine in the sky and on the earth." On the seventh day, all things in the heavens and the earth were gathered together, and God's work of creation was completed. God blessed the seventh day and made it a holy day. It was the weekend, and Mike and the Cooper family sat in the front row of the church, listening to Pastor Jeff's preaching. This time, Pastor Jeff carefully read the original text of the scriptures and did not expand on it. At the same time, during the reading, he would look at little Sheldon in the front row from time to time, fearing that the other party would ask any embarrassing questions. Fortunately, until the end of this preaching, little Sheldon did not make trouble again. Okay, this service is over. But before the end, I want to answer a little kid's doubts. Pastor Jeff smiled and shouted, "Sheldon here." Little Sheldon stood up. "I have asked Bishop James about your question last week, and now I can give you an answer." Pastor Jeff looked confident. Obviously, in order to defeat Sheldon, he also did his homework in advance this time. "I'm listening." Sheldon replied calmly. Originally, after winning the debate with Pastor Jeff last week, Sheldon was not going to trouble the other party in the church. However, now seeing Pastor Jeff's fighting spirit, Sheldon's desire to win was instantly aroused again. First, the first question. Pastor Jeff answered the question left over from last week. God is not a light ball, but he created the light ball. Then, it's the question of the octopus. God will appear in front of them in the image of an octopus, and the omniscient God can understand and speak the language of the octopus. How about it? Are you satisfied with this answer, Sheldon? Pastor Jeff asked. These words were the answers Pastor Jeff got from his superior, Bishop James. So, he was extremely confident in his answer at this moment, and this theory can be regarded as self-consistent. Little Sheldon has not been able to find obvious loopholes in these answers for the time being. However, he was unwilling to admit defeat. He turned his eyes and said, "Very good, Pastor Jeff. I have another question." Since he could not find the problem, little Sheldon was ready to launch a new round of challenges. When he heard that little Sheldon had another question, Pastor Jeff's confident expression froze. He quickly interrupted him. "Okay, this service is over. If anyone has any questions, please leave them for next week." Thank you. As the service ended, the believers left the church one by one. Little Sheldon stood in the same place, staring at Pastor Jeff, who was avoiding the battle on the stage, and complained, "This is unfair. I haven't said my question yet. Don't make things difficult for Pastor Jeff." Mary glared at her little son and pulled him out. Grandma Connie stood up and glanced at Pastor Jeff and also walked out with a smile. But after walking a few steps, she turned back to Mike, who was still sitting in the chair, and said, "Mike, the show is over. Aren't you leaving yet? You go first. I have something to do with Pastor Jeff." Mike said, "Today is the deadline for the week." Although Mike has some means to deal with vampires, but to be on the safe side, he still wanted to see if the church had a better way. What if there was an unexpected gain? Even if there was not, Mike would at most waste a little time, and there would be no other losses. After all the believers had left, Mike stood up and went to the steps. "Mike, you are here again." Pastor Jeff took out a small bottle from his body and said, "You are very lucky. Bishop James asked me to give you this thing." Under the sunlight, the transparent liquid in the small bottle exuded a faint glow and looked very beautiful. "Is this holy water?" Mike took the small bottle excitedly, observed it for a while, and asked tangled, "Is this too little?" The small bottle in Mike's hand has a capacity of only about 10 milliliters and looks very small and exquisite. Ahem. Pastor Jeff coughed fakely. He also felt that the church headquarters was a bit stingy, but he still forced an explanation. "This is holy water, which is very rare. Maybe you can dilute it before using it. Also, Bishop James asked me to tell you that there are no vampires in the world." Mike just listened to Pastor Jeff's explanation and didn't take it to heart. After all, the vampire lives in the other party's house, and the only thing left is to jump into the face and attack. After saying goodbye to Pastor Jeff, Mike put the small bottle in his hand close to his body, thinking in his heart how to use this thing to cause the greatest damage to the vampire. While Mike was thinking about how to deal with the vampire, Selena was also preparing to leave the town of Telford. She has been here long enough, and her whereabouts may have been leaked. If she hadn't promised Mike to give the other party time to consider, Selena should have left a few days ago. Time flies, and it is 12 o'clock in the middle of the night. After the residents of the town fell asleep, a red sports car stopped at the door of Grandma Connor's house. Without waiting for Selena to knock on the door, Mike pushed the door and walked out. Under the moonlight, Mike wore a loose windbreaker and a slender package on his back. Get in the car. Selena didn't say much and ordered sideways. Mike tightened the package on his back and got in the car and sat in the back seat. You know what's good for you. Selena was very satisfied with Mike's reaction. She started the car and drove out of the town, saying, "You made the right choice. In a moment, I will give you a perfect first embrace so that you can be transformed into a real vampire, and then we will go to Forks to live together." Soon, the car stopped in a small forest. It seems that Serena is ready to help Mike complete the first embrace ceremony here. The two got out of the car. Serena showed her fangs, stared at Mike's white neck, licked her lips, and said greedily, "You know, Mike, you have a unique fragrance that attracts me, and I have long wanted to taste your blood." The first embrace ceremony requires vampires to absorb some human blood first, and then inject their own blood. This process of transformation into a vampire is very long and painful for humans. Seeing Serena approaching without any defense, Mike finally found the best opportunity to fight back. In an instant, a bottle of highly corrosive Aqua Regia was splashed on Serena's face. "You know, you stink. You stink so bad." Mike, who got the first move, complained while unfolding his windbreaker and smashed all the bottles and jars hidden on his body at the other party. Some of those bottles contained industrial alcohol and some contained flammable gasoline. "Goodbye, I won't see you off." While Selena was covering her face and wailing, Mike took out a lighter. This move is called, take advantage of your illness to kill you. With the raging fire, Mike picked up a double-barreled shotgun and stood guard. He had to watch the vampire being burned to ashes before he could feel at ease. However, amid the shrill roar, bursts of black smoke suddenly came out of Selena's body. The fierce fire was quickly extinguished by the black smoke. This works? Mike was surprised, and he knew that vampires were not that simple. "Damn human, how dare you betray me!" Selena, whose one eye was blinded by Aqua Regia, was filled with endless anger. "Kill you. I will suck your blood." Everything that happened tonight made this vampire, who was over 200 years old, want to kill the human in front of him for the first time. It doesn't matter if he is handsome. The pretty boy must die. Looking at the vampire who was approaching step by step with his fangs fully exposed, Mike pulled the trigger without hesitation. Bang! With a violent sound, sparks spewed out from the muzzle. However, the double-barreled shotgun that was enough to kill an elephant did not do ideal damage to vampires. Selena, who was hit, only took 2 steps back and was not fatally injured. The pain in her body aroused her anger even more. "I will torture you 100 times and then tear you apart." Selena, who was overwhelmed by anger, had a very distorted face and no longer looked elegant as before. And her ghostly figure also frightened Mike. Mike backed away while reloading his ammunition. "Well, Miss Selena, I've thought it through now and decided to go to Forks with you. Is it too late?" "Hey despicable human, I've given you many chances, but you didn't cherish them." Selena rushed to Mike and grabbed the double-barreled shotgun. With a twist of her hands, the shotgun turned into a pile of scrap metal and fell to the ground. Then, Selena slowed down and forced Mike to push back step by step. She seemed to enjoy the terrified expression on Mike's face. The correct version is on the 16-9 book forum. "Don't come over." Mike waved his hands like a lamb to be slaughtered. "Ha ha ha. I'm coming. What can you do to me?" Selena laughed arrogantly. In front of vampires, the fragile body of humans is not worth mentioning at all. And Mike's cowardly performance also gave Selena's twisted psychology great satisfaction. The fun of cat playing with mouse is just like this. "You forced me to do this." Mike's hand seemed to be waving randomly, but in his right palm he was holding a delicate little bottle. "I hope the church can help a little bit." Mike seized the moment when his opponent was proud, opened the bottle cap, and poured the little holy water into the vampire's mouth. The holy water spread on Selena's face like a branding iron melting snow in winter. Some of the holy water flowed down her lips and into her throat. Damn, how did you get the holy water of the church? Selena rolled on the ground in pain. Her voice became hoarse and unpleasant. At this moment, she was shocked and angry. If she had known that Mike had such a backup plan, he would not have given the other party a chance at all. Under the erosion of the holy water, bursts of smoke dissipated from the vampire's body, and his strength was weakening little by little. This vampire's vitality is really tenacious. Seeing that the other party did not show any signs of dying immediately, Mike pulled out a kitchen knife from his body and prepared to go over to take a look. At this moment, a muscle cell with high beams on stopped outside the grove. Two people got out of the car and walked towards this side against the light. Sure enough, there are people from the church. Damn it. Selena's one eye glowed red, and she saw who was coming. Before Mike realized what was happening, Selena supported her weak body and climbed up and walked towards the red sports car. Mike, you wait for me. Don't think that I can't deal with you just because you have the protection of the church. Next time we meet, I will make you live a life worse than death before leaving. The vampire did not forget to threaten with a hoarse voice. Seeing that the other party was still able to move even in this state, Mike was shocked and broke into a cold sweat. Careless. If he had approached the other party without knowing it just now, the consequences would be unimaginable. At this time, the two people in the backlight saw that the vampire wanted to drive away, and one of them raised the giant weapon in his hand. In the convergence of green light, a laser hit the red sports car. In the explosion, the sports car and the vampire were all turned into slag. Damn, such a cool appearance. It's really a big guy. Watching the vampire being destroyed, Mike's tense nerves relaxed. Why did you use the portable gun directly? There is no other way. I'll let this vampire escape last time, and the superiors are very dissatisfied. With the relaxed voice, the two people who arrived walked past Mike. After confirming that the vampire was beaten into pieces and had no signs of life, the two returned to Mike. Mike also saw the two people's attire clearly, a priest in a white long robe, and a strong man in a black suit. The strong man was holding a 3-barreled gun full of technology in his hand, and the attack just now was launched by him. At this moment, both of them stared at Mike curiously. The priest pretended to be a man, sniffed the smell in the air, and spoke first. There is a smell of holy water here. You are the boy who asked Pastor Jeff how to destroy vampires. Mike nodded, but his eyes were looking at the strong man in a black suit beside him. He was too familiar with this look, the man in black. Seeing Mike's reaction, the priest smiled like a man and continued, I'm Bishop James. Next, I will baptize you and remove the bad luck from you. This time, without waiting for Mike to answer, Bishop James took out a 100ml bottle from his body, which contained holy water of higher purity. The purity of the holy water can be well distinguished from the brightness of the light. Before Mike could complain, Bishop James took a drop of holy water and applied it on his forehead. Baptism to remove bad luck is false, and verifying whether Mike is infected by vampires is true. It can be said that the church is very rigorous. Seeing that Mike had no adverse reactions to the holy water, Bishop James' smile became much more sincere. He turned his head and nodded to the man in black beside him, and the two exchanged glances tacitly. Then, Bishop James turned his back, and the strong man in black put on special sunglasses and took out a pen-shaped memory eraser from his arms. There are 3 round buttons on the memory eraser, representing timescales such as hours, weeks and years. The black-clad sturdy man adjusted the time and said, "Boy, look here." A blue light flashed, and the black-clad sturdy man took off his sunglasses and said, "Okay, boy, nothing happened tonight. No vampires, no explosions. Go back and have a good sleep. Tomorrow will be another beautiful day." Yes, the black-clad sturdy man only erased Mike's memory of that night. The memory eraser had disadvantages in its early stages of development. If ordinary people were repeatedly erased by it, or if the memory erased was too long, it would damage their brains. Of course, the ability of this memory eraser is not that amazing. It can only be used to erase the memory of ordinary people. When Mike turned around and left the woods in a daze, Bishop James looked at the wreckage of the red sports car not far away and said with a headache, "How do we deal with this?" The black-clad sturdy man did not answer after hearing this, but raised the 3-barrel plasma cannon and fired another laser. The wreckage was flat into the ground, leaving no residue. "Your black organization's actions are really brutal." Bishop James had a surprised look on his face, and then he said, "By the way, you need to accompany me to the town later. I'm not sure about Pastor Jeff." Speaking of Pastor Jeff, Bishop James felt a headache again. As a clergyman, he didn't even notice that the vampire had touched him. This situation is really embarrassing for the church. On the other side, Mike walked out of the woods, blinked his lifeless eyes, and then recovered his previous agility. "Let's see what good things Selena left for me." Mike held a large white ball of light in his hand, which was left when Selena was eliminated before. Moonlight, characteristic. 1. It can enhance combat power by 50% at night. 2. It can absorb the energy of the moon to enhance its own physique. This is equivalent to a night buff, and it is sustainable, which is a good thing. Mike integrated the characteristics of the moonlight into his body and clapped his hands with satisfaction. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 62, Third Round of League. Because of the existence of the demon body, Mike is not an ordinary person. His memory tonight was not erased by the memory eraser. After seeing the black organization, he also figured out some things. Mike had previously collected the follow-up of the Jennifer incident in the small town of Minnesota. However, there was no mention of this incident on TV and newspapers outside. Among them, it is probably because the church and the black organization blocked the news, so that ordinary people could not get in touch with that kind of supernatural event. This is a kind of protection for ordinary people. And this is also a good thing for Mike. He has the moonlight characteristic, and he is not going to participate in extraordinary events now. As an ordinary person, silent development is the kingly way. Moreover, this moonlight characteristic is indeed powerful. After basking in the moonlight for a while, Mike can feel that the physical strength he consumed in the previous battle with Selena has almost recovered. On the other hand, Mike can also feel that in the moonlight, all aspects of his body functions have indeed become more acute. Next, Mike moved his body without any burden and trotted back to Grandma Connie's house. Grandma Connie, who had her door tightly closed, didn't know that Mike had gone out tonight and had experienced such a dangerous thing. Mike didn't bother her here. He went back to his room in the dark and then opened the curtains. Sure enough, as long as there was moonlight shining in, Mike could enjoy the benefits brought by the moonlight characteristics. Before going to bed, he took a special look at his physical fitness, which was now 162. The next morning, when the first ray of sunlight shone into the window, Mike opened his eyes. At the same time, he checked his physical fitness again, and it reached 165. In one night, the moonlight characteristics increased his physical fitness by 3 points. This discovery surprised Mike. If this continues, Mike will become a little Superman in less than a year. However, Mike realized that maybe his initial physical fitness attributes were low, which was why he had such a big improvement in the early stage. Later, when his physical fitness attributes grow to a certain level, perhaps the physical fitness improvement brought by the moonlight characteristics will not be so obvious. This point still requires Mike to slowly explore in the future. In the restaurant, Grandma Connie has prepared a hearty breakfast. Today is a day when the Melford Middle School football team advances to the third round. This is a big event for the local town of Telford. In the past, Melford Middle School did not have such good results. Basically, it was eliminated in the first or second round. So in order to support the football team to continue to get good results, Grandma Connie will definitely go to the scene to cheer for the team today. Sure enough, after breakfast, Grandma Connie followed Mike out of the door. At this time, Coach George, who lives opposite, also happened to bring little George and little Sheldon out. Little George today looks very energetic and walks a little windy. As the team's receiver, he feels that his family status has been improved when the team can get such good results. After the two sides greeted each other, Mike rarely took Grandma on his car and went to school. As the game approached, many people had gathered on the school playground. Among them were not only students of all grades of the school, but also many local residents. A rough look showed that there were about 2,000 people. I'm afraid that when the official game comes, the number of people coming to watch will be even greater. Mike also saw Jack, a local reporter, waving at him in the crowd. Behind him stood an intern reporter holding a huge banner. Jack, who had benefited from Mike's success, had a much higher status in the local radio station. Now, he even had a follower. Because of the business cooperation, selling photos, Mike also smiled and waved to Jack. With Mike's excellent performance in the first two games and his appearance on the local sports channel, he is now more or less a celebrity in the town. It can be predicted that, as long as the team continues to win in the next third round, Mike will become more famous, and the photo business he and Jack are working on will only become more and more prosperous. Perhaps in the future, those who want to buy Mike's photos will no longer be limited to the female students in the school. Imagining a bright future, Mike walked towards the locker room accompanied by George. Not far away, he saw Karen, a big wave, facing this side in the corner, waving vigorously. Seeing this, George, who was standing by, envied for a second, then walked to the locker room alone. "What's up, Karen?" Mike asked as he walked to the corner. Karen was still so pretty in her cheerleading skirt. She looked around first, then quickly said, "Mike, in today's game, Regina mobilized all the cheerleaders and told them not to cheer for you. You should be prepared." On the sports field, many athletes are atmosphere players. Having beautiful women cheering them on will often make them burst out with stronger fighting power. A perfect version of the book in 16:9. Regina seized this point and retaliated against Mike. It must be said that the queen bee also has some tricks, but not much. Mike's mental age is not that of a 15 or 16-year-old child, so this level of targeting doesn't matter at all. "Thank you for telling me." Mike smiled and thanked the girl who came to tell him. "Come on, Mike." Karen clenched her fist and made a cheering gesture. "No matter what, I will support you," the girl said. Her eyes gradually became firm. At the same time, in her heart, her dissatisfaction with the queen bee gradually overwhelmed her fear. After chatting with Karen for a few more words, Mike walked towards the football locker room again. Unexpectedly, when he came to the locker room corridor, he met Katie again at the corner. Katie was also wearing a cheerleading uniform at this time, with delicate makeup on her face. Compared with a few weeks ago, her appearance and temperament have been greatly improved. After seeing Mike, Katie's eyes lit up and she said, "Mike, you have to be careful, Regina." Before the girl finished speaking, Mike added, "Did she ask you not to cheer for me? How do you know?" Katie was a little surprised. Mike smiled and didn't explain much, but said, "I already know about this matter, but I still want to thank you." Hearing Mike's thanks, Katie was a little excited. Then, she said, "Don't worry, Mike, I will always stand by your side." Also, many people in the cheerleading team don't understand Regina's request this time. Obviously, Queen Bee's behavior this time was a bad move, and she stood on the opposite side of the girls. Judging from the performance of Karen and Katie, Regina's prestige in the cheerleading team is not very good now. After saying goodbye to Katie, Mike stepped into the door of the locker room. The players in the room were very eager to see Mike come in, and some people took the initiative to make way for him along the way. It can only be said that Mike conquered his teammates with his excellent performance in the first two games. Now, he has vaguely become the boss of the locker room. Chapter 63. The game begins. There are more than 100 colleges and universities in Texas, which are divided into 4 divisions, and each division has about 20 teams. Because the summer league adopts a single round elimination mode, basically if you survive the third round, you can lock in the top 10 in the state. And the top 10 in Texas is a height that Melford Public High School has never reached before. So in a way, this football team is now making history. After a long period of preparation, the time came to 10:30. Captain Aaron gathered the players in advance and went to the entrance to prepare. Here you can hear the noisy waves outside, which makes the expressions on the players' faces gradually become nervous. As the game is about to start, the audience has also arrived at the scene one after another. More than 4,000 spectators are almost filling up the playground of Melford High School. Mike, are you nervous now? At the entrance, George rubbed the straps on his helmet and asked in a low voice. Because he was too nervous, his hands were shaking a little and his breathing was a little unsmooth. It's okay, Mike said casually. Mike, who has been exposed to two extraordinary events, naturally has a vision that is not comparable to that of ordinary people. In his eyes, this situation can only be regarded as a small scene. Little George looked at Mike's calm appearance, which did not seem fake, and envied him. You really have a big heart. Mike smiled and shrugged without much explanation. On the other side, at the side door of the passage, little Sheldon and Dan were stopped by the security students. My father George is the head coach of the team, and my brother George is the wide receiver of the team. And running back Mike, he is also my friend. Little Sheldon explained seriously, wanting to get some special treatment. The student in charge of security at the door, of course, also knew little Sheldon. Regarding the other party's request to enter the preparation passage, the security student thought about it and said, you can go in, but remember, don't disturb the players. Thank you. Little Sheldon nodded after getting the concession and took Dan into the passage. Little George saw little Sheldon coming over and quickly shouted, Sheldon, how did you get in? This is not the place for you. Get out. I'm not here to see you. Little Sheldon glanced past little George and looked at Mike on the side, saying, Mike, Dan wants to ask you for an autograph. At this time, Dan also quickly came out from behind little Sheldon, handed over a photo and a pen, and asked carefully, can I? This Vietnamese classmate who usually speaks very little and has an introverted personality left a good impression on Mike. Besides, it's just an autograph, which doesn't take much effort. Mike took the photo, looked at his handsome image on it, and while signing his name, he joked, Dan, how come I didn't know that the boys in the school have also started to collect my photos? Dan, who was asked, smiled awkwardly and didn't know how to answer. In fact, Dan didn't want this autograph himself, but a girl in the school asked him for it. Dan, who didn't know how to refuse, found little Sheldon for help. Seeing Dan's reaction, Mike seemed to understand something. He smiled meaningfully and then handed the signed photo back to the other party. Just at this time, Coach George also walked into the entrance. Like little George, he saw little Sheldon at a glance and asked in confusion, Shelly, how did you come in? Get out quickly. Little Sheldon's purpose of this trip had been achieved. Seeing his father's stern expression, he snorted and then walked towards the side door proudly. Seeing his little son's attitude, George suddenly raised his voice and shouted, hurry up. Little Sheldon, who was walking slowly, was startled and then ran towards the side door with his arms tucked under his arms. Dan, who was following behind him, was so scared that he turned around and bowed to Coach George, said I'm sorry in a crying voice, and then quickly disappeared through the side door. Coach George, who had played a little prank, saw Dan's overreaction, touched his fat face, and doubted himself, am I so scary? Forget it, business is more important. Coach George shook his head and clapped his hands, attracting the attention of all the players. Our opponent this time is St. Mary's College. They are the only team that has ever entered the top 10 in the state. Now, the opportunity is in front of us. As long as we beat St. Mary's College, we can also become one of the top 10 in Texas this year. Our school, Melford Middle School, will also be proud of us. Coach George looked at the players' gradually aroused emotions and continued to encourage, boys, for the sake of honor, we have only one goal, that is to win. Come on, kids. Coach George clenched his fist and stretched it out. Everyone gathered in a circle and put their hands together. 1, 2, 3. What is our goal? Victory. Victory. The correct version of the book is in the 16-9 book bar. Looking at the players' fighting spirit, Coach George nodded with satisfaction. Then, with the sound of the players entering the court, Coach George patted Aaron and Mike on the back and said, go, this moment belongs to you. As the core of the team, Aaron and Mike were the first to walk out of the passage, welcoming the cheers of the whole audience. Regina didn't expect that Mike would appear with the captain iron. Her previous plan against Mike was completely failed at this moment. None of the cheerleaders cared about Regina's feelings at this moment. They waved their hands enthusiastically, showing the vitality of youth. Mike walked around the court for half a circle, enjoyed the cheers of the crowd, and prepared to return to his own territory. Mike here. A child holding a SLR on the sidelines, waved his hands desperately. This child looked only about 5 or 6 years old, and was very cute with fair skin and tender skin. Mike turned around, walked to his little fan, and asked with a smile, "Are you calling me?" "Yes, Mike, I've seen you on TV, I'm your loyal fan." The child looked excited, and then said, "My name is Little Scene, can you sign for me?" Little Scene said, handing out a pen, and pulling up the hem of his white t-shirt. "It feels good to have such a little fan." Mike signed his name generously and said, "Thank you for your support, Little Scene." When Mike was about to leave, Little Scene suddenly said, "Mike, do you know that there is also a Michael in the St. Mary's football team? His name is Michael O'Hare, and he is my family. He will definitely surprise you in today's game." "What is this? Is it a declaration of war?" It turns out that this stinky kid is a black fan. Mike took back his previous opinion. This kid named Little Scene is actually not as cute as little Sheldon. Mike, who was messed up, made a fierce expression and turned back to glare at the black fan on the sidelines. After seeing that the other party was frightened, he returned to his own preparation area with satisfaction. Chapter 64. The game is in progress. When the football players from St. Mary's College entered the field, there was a burst of exclamations. In terms of overall physique, the players from St. Mary's College were generally much stronger than those from Melford High School. Among them, their number 74 player, Michael O'Hare, had the most exaggerated physique. He was nearly 2 meters tall and weighed more than 220 pounds. With this height and weight appearing on the field, he was like a heavy armored vehicle. It can be said that Michael O'Hare's outstanding physical talent is very rare in professional football teams. Not to mention appearing in the high school league, it was simply a dimensionality reduction attack. In the preparation area of Melford Middle School, Coach George looked at the opponent's number 74 and sighed. "I've heard that St. Mary's College recently recruited a talented defensive tackle, but I didn't expect it to be such a big guy. However, as far as I know, this big guy on the other side has only been in contact with football for a short time, so we still have a chance." Coach George helped everyone build confidence. "Believe me, not everyone is like our Mike, who grows so fast." When they thought of Mike's growth rate and strong fighting power, the expressions on the players' faces eased. "Yes, we have Mike. We are invincible." At this time, little George shouted at the most appropriate time. Seeing this, the other players looked at each other and smiled a little. The previous fear of fighting also disappeared by more than half. In football games, what is often competed is team cohesion and fighting spirit. The former can make the players trust each other and play exquisite cooperation. The latter can activate the players' desire to win and let them perform beyond their level on the field. Seeing the players regain their confidence, Coach George smiled with satisfaction and then arranged the tactics. "Since the opponent dares to send a novice to the field, we will win with tactics this time. In this game, we still use Aaron and Mike as the core and adopt the interspersed tactics. Interspersed tactics, also known as infiltration tactics, are a set of multi-point offensive play that often makes the opponent unable to figure out their own offensive routes. It reflects a flexibility." Coach George, who explained the key points of the interspersed tactics again, asked loudly, "Do you understand what I mean?" "I understand," the players responded loudly. As the game whistle sounded, Coach George encouraged, "Very good, boys, go." When the players entered the field, George quietly pulled Mike and whispered, "Mike, as one of the cores of the team's offense, you must learn to protect yourself. Play smarter." Although Coach George believed in Mike's strength, considering the strong physique of the opponent's number 74, he hoped that Mike would not get injured because of impulse. Only those who stayed on the field could have a better performance. "Don't worry, Coach," Mike said with full fighting spirit. "I will take the victory back." As the game started, Melford Middle School won the first round of attack in the guessing game. Beep. The offensive whistle sounded. Aaron received the football from the center and rushed forward. When he attracted the opponent's quarterback to block him, he took the initiative to pass the ball to Mike. As the team's running back, Mike had already analyzed the situation on the field. In a very short time, he made a smart choice to avoid the opponent's tightly defended left half of the field and break out from the right with the ball. Dodge, pass, speed up. During Mike's skillful personal performance, cheers rang out from the outside. "That's it, kid, come on Mike. Go, go, go. Kill those asterisk asterisk asterisk." The Texas Rednecks showed their enthusiasm in their unique way of cheering. Amid the shouting, Mike rushed to the opponent's end zone at a high speed, looked back and found that he had successfully gotten rid of all opponents. So, he slowed down, walked across the end zone line with ease, and scored a touchdown. With a boom, the enthusiasm outside the stadium was ignited, and the audience danced and celebrated Mike's good shot. "I knew it, I knew he would do it." Jack, a local reporter in the best viewing area, looked at the picture he took, and his neck was red with excitement. Mike's single touchdown performance this time was enough to enter the top 10 of the week. After being excited, Jack shouted to the intern reporter beside him, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and take out the banner." Not long after, a huge banner with Mike's portrait was slowly unfolded in the audience area. Look at the correct version in 16,191 book and 1 forum. Then, this banner was passed from person to person, moving and waves over the crowd. "That's it, another touchdown. Let the opponent see our strength." Coach George clenched his fists, waved them fiercely in the air a few times, and shouted to the players on the field. This is also a tactic to crush the opponent's belief with a refreshing score. Melford Middle School, which had a second chance to attack, retreated to the 5-yard line of the opponent's end zone. Captain Aaron received the coach's instructions. He half crouched with the ball and glanced at Mike behind him. Mike nodded after understanding. Beep. With the whistle of the second attack, Captain Aaron passed the ball to Mike again by hand, and then he rushed to the opponent's quarterback. Mike did not play a fake move. After receiving the ball, he relied on his flexible running position to rush into the opponent's end zone from the right half of the opponent's area again. Mike, who achieved the second touchdown, also added 2 more points for Melford Middle School. The 8 points in a row at the beginning gave the Melford football team a great advantage both psychologically and in terms of points. Don't be anxious or discouraged. Forget the damn score. You just need to play steadily, and victory will definitely belong to you on the sidelines. Cotton, the head coach of St. Mary's College, was loudly encouraging the players. Before the game, the head coach also specifically studied the strength of the Melford High School rugby team. In his opinion, Melford High School is definitely not a match for St. Mary's College in terms of hard power. As long as his players do not lose confidence and can play to their full potential, the final victory will definitely belong to St. Mary's College. With the shouting of Coach Cotton, the impetuous hearts of the players of St. Mary's College really calmed down. After exchanging the ball, the players of both sides once again formed their formations in the midfield. The offensive formation adopted by St. Martin's College is the most common 4-3-4 formation. This formation emphasizes balance, giving up some of the possibility of attack, so that this lineup has a strong fault tolerance rate. To put it bluntly, this lineup is more suitable for strong teams to crush their opponents. Chapter 65 A Tough Match. Beep. The offensive whistle sounded again. The quarterback of St. Mary's College did not rush to organize the attack. He held the football and made a few gestures to his teammates. The players who received the instructions immediately dispersed. This set of positions suddenly looked a bit like an infiltration tactic. However, the quarterback of St. Mary's College did not attack in vain. Instead, when he encountered a rush, he passed the ball to the players who were supporting him. Then, when the players encountered an obstacle, they sent the ball back to the quarterback again. This set of 4-3-4 tactics highlights a steady state, with teammates around to support him at any time. The disadvantage is that the advancement speed is extremely slow and the viewing experience is extremely poor. Before long, the audience who had had enough of St. Mary's College's soft offense began to curse, and one by one they turned into elegant and easygoing Zorn people. What you watch in football is the passionate confrontation between the two sides. The steady style of play of St. Mary's College is naturally not satisfactory. Beep. Just as the boring tug-of-war was going on the field and the audience was about to lose patience, the referee blew the foul whistle and signaled that number 74 of St. Mary's College had committed an offensive foul. Number 74 Michael Oher of St. Mary's College, although he was tall and strong, had an IQ of only 80. He had just joined the football team and could not adapt to the players' needs for running positions. In the tactical execution of St. Mary's College just now, Michael Oher was squeezed out by Melford's players and became a marginal person. Oher, who was not useful at all, was so stubborn that he grabbed an opponent's shoulder and threw him to the ground in order not to disappoint the expectations of his coach and family. This was a regular offensive foul. Calm down, Michael, you just need to do your own thing and cover the quarterback. Coach Cotton of St. Mary's College on the sidelines saw Oher committing a foul and reminded him anxiously. Obviously, although Oher's quality and body were bursting, Coach Cotton did not find and use his method. Beep. With the whistle of the second gear attack of St. Mary's College, the field entered the boring tug-of-war time again. Seeing that St. Mary's College still adopted the original tactics, the audience outside the field cursed words such as soft egg and coward. Beep. Number 74 was fouled again. This time, Oher really stood in front of his own quarterback. Seeing someone approaching to press, he directly carried a Melford player on his shoulders. This is a mistake that no novice would make, and the scene is very funny. Michael push the opponent away. Coach Cotton was really anxious this time. While shouting, he demonstrated to Oher how to push people away. On the sidelines, Little Scene, who was about to take a wonderful shot of Michael Oher, covered his eyes speechlessly. Oher's football knowledge was all taught by him, and now the opponent's performance on the field made him a little embarrassed, especially before he had issued a challenge letter to another Mike, and the parents standing behind him were also anxious about Oher's performance. Among them, the blonde mother, Leanne Talsey, excitedly shouted to Coach Cotton, "You wasted Michael's talent. You should let the quarterback go for the touchdown. Michael will protect his teammates like he protects his family. He only needs one chance." Coach Cotton still didn't believe in Oher's ability. He tilted his head and pretended not to hear Leanne's words. Then, he gestured to the players on the field, indicating that they should continue with the original tactics. Beep. St. Mary's College's third gear offense. This time, Oher, wearing the number 74 jersey, did not dare to make any other moves. He was like a child who didn't know what to do, wandering around the field. Then, he was knocked to the ground by Melford's players. Beep. Oher lay on the ground, staring blankly at the sky. Michael, seeing her child being bullied, Leanne rushed to the sidelines despite her husband's dissuasion, shouting, "Stand up, Michael." After Oher got up, as if nothing had happened, Leanne continued to excitedly shout to the quarterback of St. Mary's College, "You should attack and touchdown. Michael will protect you. He has the ability to help the team win. Madam, please leave here." Seeing Leanne trying to influence the game, the referee immediately came over and persuaded her to leave. "Cotton, say something." Leanne was still shouting loudly after being sent back to her husband. St. Mary's College had used 3 offensive opportunities, but because the tactics were too stable, the football only moved forward more than 4 yards. Look at the correct version in 16,191 book and bar. Now the problem is in front of Coach Cotton, whether to choose to punt or continue with the original tactics. Obviously, the original tactics have been proven to be ineffective. Listening to Leanne's shouts, Coach Cotton decided to go crazy. He used a timeout opportunity to call Oher to him, stared into his eyes, and asked, "Michael, can I trust you?" "Yes, coach. You can trust me." With the encouragement of his family, Oher's honest face showed a hint of determination. "Very good, Michael. No matter what happens on the field next, I just need you to protect the quarterback." Coach Cotton said his request. Then, he called the quarterback to him and gave him the order to attack the touchdown. Beep. The game continued, and this time the quarterback of St. Mary's College rushed forward with the football. On his side, a tall figure followed him forward. As the left winger, Oher's duty is to protect the quarterback and help the quarterback clear all obstacles. Although Oha did not understand the complicated tactics, he remembered that Leanne told him to protect his teammates like protecting his family. With this concept in mind, Oha rushed all the way on the offensive side, knocking away several players who Melford came forward to block. He led his quarterback into the Melford team's end zone. Finally, this time, St. Mary's College's tough attack received a little recognition from the audience outside the stadium. Many people also changed their views on the big man Oha and gave him sparse applause. Compared with the excitement of St. Mary's College, Coach George on the sidelines frowned as he stared at the opponent's strong number 74. Sure enough, this number 74 is not simple. After Oha led his quarterback to another touchdown 5 yards outside the end zone and tied the score, Coach George finally couldn't sit still. He looked at Sam, who had not played in the past 2 rounds, and asked, "Sam, if I'll let you play now, can you hold back the opponent's number 74? Sam used to be the running back of the team, but since Mike took his place, he has been sitting on the bench. This is how high school football teams are. The capable ones go, and the weak ones step down." Chapter 66, Head-on Confrontation. Because of the overlapping positions with Mike, Sam knew that it would be difficult for him to beat him in the running back position. And now, he really needed to win the attention of the coach with a wonderful performance. He understood Coach George's intention, stared at the opponent's number 74 on the field, and promised seriously, "Believe me, coach, as long as you send me to the field, I will definitely defend that big guy to death." Looking at the opponent's eyes full of fighting spirit, Coach George nodded and reminded, "I don't need you to defend the opponent to death. You just need to contain that big guy. Do you understand?" Containing Coach George's view, the opponent's No 74's strong body and explosive power. It is simply unrealistic to completely restrict him. Sam went on the field. As long as he could contain the opponent a little bit, it would be considered a success if he could prevent number 74 from playing the role he should. Sam, who watched a round of games off the field, did not realize how terrible Oha was. He only saw that the performance of the opponent's big guy was a pure football novice. Sam was best at bullying novices. As the ball was about to be exchanged again, Coach George, who had received Sam's repeated assurances, replaced him on the field. On the field, Sam's position also became a offensive tackle, just in time to face the opponent's big man. Sam, who got the chance to play again, was a little excited. He looked directly at Oha, who had a silly expression on his face, and said provocatively, "Hey, big guy, do you know what you are going to do in a while?" Sam, who did not get a response from the other side, knocked on his helmet, pointed 2 fingers at his eyes, and continued with an arrogant expression, "I will stare at you all the time. I will be your nightmare." Beep. The whistle of Melford Middle School's attack sounded. After receiving the serve from the center, Captain Aaron did not think too much and threw the football to Mike on the sideline again. If there is anyone who is the most trustworthy in the Melford football team, it must be Mike. The interspersed tactics are just right, which can make his strong personal strength play its due role. Back to defense. Back to defense. Seeing Melford's number 21 Mike, he wanted to charge again. Coach Cotton was on the sidelines, reminding the players loudly. He saw from the first round of offense that Melford's number 21 was definitely another core of the team. This time Mike held the ball again, which also confirmed Coach Cotton's guess. The situation on the field changed instantly. The players of St. Mary's College adjusted their defensive focus and surrounded Mike. Looking at the layers of obstruction in front of him, Mike did not choose to force a breakthrough this time. Football is a team sport. Mike adjusted his posture and passed the ball back to Aaron in the midfield again. He bumped into the defensive players of St. Mary's and started a fierce close battle. After Mike attracted most of the defensive forces, there was almost no obstruction in front of Captain Aaron. As the team's quarterback and the absolute core, Aaron did not miss this excellent offensive opportunity. He rushed forward with the football in his arms. Amid the cheers of the audience, Aaron also achieved a touchdown achievement. After the touchdown, Aaron excitedly threw the ball into the sky. Then he ran to Mike and gave him a big hug. It was this feeling that Aaron, who planned to play football as his future career, enjoyed this moment very much. On the other side, Sam, who had provoked his opponent before the kickoff, was lying on the ground. Feeling the pain in his chest, he was a little doubtful about his life. "Sam, are you okay?" Coach George, who had been paying attention to the situation on the sidelines, asked loudly. Hearing the coach's concern, Sam slapped Oha's hand in front of him, climbed up from the ground, and jumped twice easily. "I'm fine, coach." In the previous round of the game, although Sam was knocked to the ground by Oha at the beginning, he did use his trash talk to attract the attention of the big man on the opposite side. In a way, Sam has successfully completed his task. Later, Melford had a second scoring opportunity, and Mike played a tactical cooperation with Aaron again. With Mike's way of attracting the opponent's defense, Aaron scored another single touchdown. Aaron, who has a gentle personality, rarely scored twice. After getting the second touchdown, he hugged his teammates excitedly. This moment also became the most glorious moment in his entire high school career. Beep. As the whistle sounded, the first quarter of the game ended, and both sides entered the rest time. During the 2-minute rest time, Coach George first affirmed the performance of the players, and then emphasized Aaron and Mike. Then, Coach George also expressed his praise for Sam's performance in restraining the opponent's number 74. In the 16-9 book, The Bar, and the correct version, Sam, who was recognized by Coach George, also felt the sense of honor of the team for the first time. 2 minutes later, the players of both sides came to the midfield again to kick off. Sam continued his trash talk. "Big guy, I was careless just now. This time, you can't get past me." Beep. As the whistle sounded, the offensive time of St. Mary's College began. In this round, Coach Cotton learned from the previous lesson and changed the offensive rhythm. After receiving the serve, the quarterback of St. Mary's College directly launched a charge. The other players also quickly moved to the center to clear the interference for the quarterback. Sam looked at the big guy who wanted to bypass him and help his teammates to clear the way, and said sarcastically, "What's wrong, big guy? Are you afraid of me?" Bang! Sam was greeted by a violent collision, and he fell to the ground meaninglessly again. This time, Oha did not stop his steps. After getting rid of Sam, he quickly caught up with his own quarterback. Then, in the charging team, Oha became the sharpest spear. "Stop him! Stop him!" Seeing that the situation was not good, Coach George on the sidelines had no time to care about Sam. He shouted loudly to his own players. On the other side, Coach Cotton also shouted excitedly, "That's it, Michael, you are the best. I know you can do it." Obviously, at this moment, Coach Cotton found the right way to use Oha. Oha, who is physically strong, only needs the simplest and most direct instructions to play the greatest role. Amid the noisy voices outside the field, Oha knocked over several Melford players along the way. Finally, he escorted his quarterback to the end zone. In the second additional scoring session of St. Mary's College, seeing Oha squeeze out his opponent again and help his quarterback to easily get a touchdown, Coach George murmured unwillingly, "Damn, we can't limit that big guy at all." After the exchange of the ball, the football came into Mike's hands. He used his flexible footwork to get rid of his opponent and help Melford Middle School score 6 points again. Fortunately, we have Mike on the sidelines. Coach George, who was watching the game, was surprised and happy, as if he had taken a roller coaster. He lost control of his expression, and all he could do now was to believe in his players. It can be foreseen that this game will be a tough battle. Chapter 67, Real Men's Battle. Because of the intensity of the high school league, many games often end with both sides only getting a dozen points. In this top 10 competition, Melford Middle School and St. Mary's College changed the score to 24-16 not long after the second quarter. This situation has exceeded the intensity of the general college league. Of course, the excitement continues. When Melford Middle School had a second chance to score, Mike once again used his superb skills to help the team score 2 more points. Then, St. Mary's College, which exchanged the ball, also counterattacked. They also used their powerful rushing ability to catch up with the score again. As the players of both sides went back and forth, the game became more and more tense. And being able to see such a wonderful game on the spot also allowed the audience to continue to send their enthusiasm. As the game progressed, at the end of the third quarter, the score between the two sides came to 33-30. Melford Middle School maintained its leading position with a slight advantage. There is also good news for Melford Middle School, that is, at the beginning of the fourth quarter, they still had the right to kick off. This is a good opportunity to open the score. During the 2-minute break, Coach George did not explain the tactics to the players. Seeing the players' tired appearance, he encouraged them. "You did a great job, kids. I'm proud of you. Hang on, keep going, and victory belongs to us." The 3 quarters plus the halftime break and the timeout made the game last for nearly an hour. The high-intensity confrontation made the players suffer from the test of physical exhaustion. It can also be said that it was a test of will. Coach George looked at Sam, who was slumped, and lowered his head, and asked with concern, "Sam, how are you? Can you hold on?" In the previous 3 quarters, Sam was very tenacious. Although he did not completely defend the opponent's number 74, he played a role to some extent. Melford Middle School was able to take a slight lead, and Sam definitely contributed to it. "I can still hold on." Coach Sam raised his head stubbornly, and the sweat on his face seemed to have been washed by water. As a former school bully, Sam has his own pride, and he can't tolerate his own incompetence the most. He felt that powerless feeling once on Mike. Now, he would never allow himself to lose to the opponent's number 74 again. Coach George understood Sam's determination. He patted him on the shoulder and said, "You are a good boy. Don't force yourself. If you can't hold on, tell me at any time." The 2-minute break passed in a flash, and the players from both sides went on the court again for the final battle. As the players came on the court, the enthusiasm of the audience was ignited again. Amid the cheers and shouts, Sam shook off the sweat from the corners of his eyes and looked up at the big guy on the opposite side. This time he did not provoke again, but his eyes were more determined than before. Beep. The whistle sounded, and Melford began to attack. Sam quickly moved sideways and blocked number 74, who was about to intercept the football. Then, with a bang, the 2 big guys collided with each other. Sam, who was smaller in size, fell to the ground, and then, with his strong will, he stretched out his hand and tried to pull Oha. Beep. Because Sam continued to pull people after falling to the ground, Melford Middle School was called for an offensive foul. Perhaps infected by Sam's strong will, Oha showed a friendly smile on his silly face. Then, he bent his huge body and tried to help Sam up. Sam waved his hand stubbornly, indicating that it was not necessary. Then, the Melford players who came over separated Oha and helped Sam up. This time, the players were not dissatisfied with Sam's foul, but showed a little admiration. "You have a nosebleed." Mike walked closer and reminded him. Sam took off his helmet and wiped his nose, and a blood stain appeared on his fingers. It can be seen that his physical strength has reached the limit and his face is a little pale. Mike raised his hand and signaled Coach George to call a timeout. Then, a group of players helped Sam to the sidelines. From a tactical point of view, Sam, the biggest player in the team, is indeed the most suitable to defend the opponent's number 74 big man. But looking at his current state, he is no longer suitable for the next game. Without Sam's restraint, if the opponent's number 74 is allowed to play to his physical advantage, there will probably be many unexpected events in the next game. No one wants to see this situation. Just when Coach George was thinking about countermeasures, Mike took the initiative to say, "Coach, why don't you let me deal with that big guy? I'm confident that I can restrain him." A correct version in the 16-9 book forum. Mike is recognized as the player with the strongest physique in the team. It is indeed a good idea to let him restrain the opponent's number 74 with the strongest physique. Coach George, who had no better countermeasures, was tempted at first. Then, he quickly shook his head and refused. "No, Mike. You are our offensive core. If you focus on the defensive end, it will definitely disrupt the overall offensive rhythm of the team." After hearing what Coach George said, the players nodded in approval. More than half of the 33 points scored by Melford on the court were scored by Mike on the offensive end with his extraordinary personal strength. It is indeed a bit unreasonable for such an offensive core to go to the defensive support. Don't jump to conclusions. Mike analyzed the situation. "After the first 3 quarters, I found that the opponent's offensive ability is very strong, but it is too dependent on number 74. As long as I can limit number 74 in the fourth quarter, their offensive firepower will be strangled. Mike can see that the offensive tactics adopted by St. Mary's College are the on-the-spot response of the opponent's coach, and the success of this tactic depends on the strong cover ability of the opponent's number 74. If this number 74 can be restricted, the opponent's offensive tactics will be half useless. As Mike explained, the situation on the field gradually became clear. At this time, Mike continued, "Moreover, I believe in my teammates. After the threat of number 74 is gone, they will definitely be able to stop the opponent's offense." Of course, the premise of all these speculations is that Mike can really limit the opponent's number 74. If he really did what he said, and the opponent's coach continued to use the offensive tactics that his players were not familiar with, then the next situation will definitely give St. Mary's College a surprise. Listening to Mike's future plans and his trust in themselves and others, the eyes of Melford's players gradually became firm. Who doesn't have a heart to show themselves when they can join the football team? Now, Mike has given them the opportunity. Coach George also realized that Mike's suggestion is the easiest way for Melford Middle School to win now. However, the premise of all this is that Mike can limit the opponent's number 74. This is not an easy task. Are you sure you want to do this? Coach George was still a little worried. Of course, all this is for victory, Mike said freely. In fact, Mike, who has a demon body, doesn't care about confrontation and injuries. Okay, Mike's prospect of victory touched Coach George. He called the players together and talked about the tactical arrangements for the next game. Chapter 68 Team Spirit. The timeout ended, and Mike, who was on the offensive side, stood at the running back position again. This was the result of comprehensive consideration by Coach George. He hoped that in the first round of offense in the fourth quarter, Mike could help the team to open up the score and expand the advantage. Then, when the ball was exchanged, Mike went to the defensive tackle position to try to defend the big man. If the effect was not ideal, Coach George, who still had a timeout opportunity, could rearrange the tactics. In the sport of football, Coach George's level is not low. With rich experience, he considered all possibilities in this tactical adjustment. Beep, the whistle sounded, and Captain Aaron, who was in the second gear offense, faced the defense of the opponent's quarterback and accurately found Mike's position again and threw the ball out. Mike, who received the football, glanced at the opponent's position and chose to break out from the opponent's right half of the weak side again. Geo Mike, who has level 3 football experience, kept changing his rushing posture and passed the opponents who came to intercept one by one. The combination of extreme speed and exquisite skills allowed Mike to perform a textbook one-man charge. Stop him. Stop him. Watching Mike's unstoppable momentum as he passed several people, Coach Cotton shouted to his players on the sidelines to return to defense. On the left half of the field, Oha, who was no longer restrained by anyone, quickly joined the team's defense after hearing the coach's call. He crossed the entire left and right half of the field with a strong attitude and caught up with Mike. The audience outside the field opened their mouths in surprise when they saw the figure of number 74 coming across. No one expected that number 74, with his huge body, could have a speed that was not inferior to Mike. Oha, who has all these characteristics, is definitely the most difficult opponent on the football field and cannot be ignored. Next, it depends on how Mike responds. Mike, who was running at full speed, also saw the big guy catching up from the side in his peripheral vision. The opponent's speed made him have to pay attention. In fact, in this round, Oha tried his best. Panting, he rushed forward and hit Mike from the side after approaching his opponent. Now Mike was waiting for this moment. After predicting the big guy's intention to hit him, he used his strong core strength group to stop his forward momentum several times and then leaned back slightly. On the other side, Oha, who took the lead in attacking, had lost his center of gravity and could not change direction. In the end, the two missed each other by a hair's breadth. Oha hit the air and staggered out of the sideline. Mike, holding the football, accelerated again and rushed across the end zone line amid the cheers of the audience. The score on the field was therefore rewritten to 39:30. Moreover, Melford had another chance to score. With cheers, Melford's players on the field gathered around Mike and celebrated enthusiastically. Mike's single-handed attack just now seemed to have no fierce confrontation. However, the players on the field all understood the danger. Mike's touchdown performance made the team lead the opponent by as much as 9 points. Victory seemed to be just around the corner, and the top 10 in the state did not seem so difficult. Moreover, the Melford team had such a strong backbone as Mike, which made the players feel very relaxed. Next, in the second chance to score, Mike once again used his superb skills to score 2 more points for the team. The scores of the two teams were finally pulled apart not long after the start of the fourth quarter. 41-30 Melford had a huge advantage of 11 points. The remaining quarter depended on whether they could maintain this advantage. Don't be discouraged, kids. The game is not over yet. We still have a chance. Cotton, the coach of St. Mary's College, saw that the St. Mary's players became depressed after losing points and quickly boosted their morale on the sidelines. At the same time, he also encouraged Oha, who was carrying an important task on the field. Michael, you performed very well today. In the next round of offense, I want you to help the quarterback score like before. There were nearly 10 minutes left before the end of the game. In Coach Cotton's opinion, his team definitely had the possibility of a comeback, as long as Oha could continue to play a role on the offensive end as before. The 11-point gap could be eliminated in 2 rounds of offense. Yes, the situation had reached this point, and Coach Cotton had not given up his desire for victory. However, he deliberately overlooked 1 point. While St. Mary's College was chasing points, Melford Middle School still had the possibility of continuing to score. Of course, the people of St. Mary's College could not think too much about this situation. What they needed to do now was to continue to rush and score. After exchanging the ball, the quarterback of St. Mary's College gathered the formation and prepared to continue to rush. At this time, the audience outside the field suddenly exclaimed loudly. What did they see? In the Melford team, Mike, who had previously performed brilliantly on the offensive end, changed his position and moved to the position of defensive tackle. A correct version can be found in the 16:9 book forum. Opposite him was the big man Oha from St. Mary's College. Realizing that Mike was about to intercept the opponent's big guy, the audience who liked to watch the fierce confrontation gave their biggest cheers in this game. Of course, some of the audience expressed their incomprehension of Coach George's arrangement and protested. Visually speaking, Mike, who was slender, was not in the same league as the big guy on the opposite side with a swollen body. Everyone saw the fighting power of the big guy number 74 before. Instead of letting Mike get injured for no reason while intercepting the big guy, it would be better to let him continue to play his advantages on the offensive end. George's head must be broken. Reporter Jack, who was in the best viewing area on the sidelines, kept muttering and expressing his dissatisfaction. He had witnessed Mike's rise all the way, and although he knew that Mike had an extraordinary physique, he still thought that Mike should be a technical player in his heart. After all, Mike's smooth performance in the game was pleasing enough to watch, and the tactical arrangement of fighting closely with the opponent's tackle, like now, was really unwise. On the other side, Little Scene, holding a single-handed reflex camera, saw that the two Mikes were about to face off. He shouted excitedly, "Big Michael, come on. You are the best. Let the opponent see your strong physique." Yes, Little Scene, as a black fan of Mike Quinn, was cheering for his family Michael Oha at this moment. He was going to take a picture of Oha's wonderful performance and upload it to the internet later. Beep, the offensive whistle sounded. The quarterback of St. Mary's College held the football and rushed straight to the back half of Melford Middle School. As the game started, Mike ran ahead of time and blocked Oha, who wanted to join the main force. At this moment, he squatted slightly and raised his hands, ready to meet the collision of the opponent's big guy. In Oha's mind, he was still thinking about the coach's words, "Help the quarterback score." Seeing someone blocking his way, Oha didn't think much and rushed towards his opponent. He wanted to knock away number 21 in front of him, like he knocked away Sam. However, the violent collision he imagined did not happen. Mike saw the opportunity and grabbed the opponent's upper armor at the moment when the big guy rushed over. While twisting his body, he used the force to throw his opponent out. The visual impact of a fat man over 2 meters tall and weighing over 220 pounds being thrown out was spectacular. OMG, how did he do it? The audience outside the field who were watching the confrontation between the two tackles immediately went crazy. Shouts and exclamations were higher and higher. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 69. Advance to the top 10. In the reasonable collision zone, as long as it is not for the purpose of intentional injury, it is rare to trigger the foul regulations. Moreover, in this round, Mike was on the passive defense side, and his actions were considered clean. The referee who was paying attention to this side also looked away after seeing the big guy who was thrown out, and got up, as if nothing had happened. At the scene, except for Coach Cotton who was protesting on the sidelines, no one else thought that Mike's defense was problematic. While Oha was completely restrained by Mike, seeing the state's top 10 in sight, the other players of Melford Middle School also showed their tenacious side. In the fierce confrontation, the quarterback of St. Mary's College was intercepted by Captain Aaron and his men at the midline, and there was even a tendency to be forced back. Beep. The quarterback of St. Mary's College, who was holding the ball, was knocked down by the opponent's continuous impact. He protected the football tightly under his body, and while keeping the ball, he also lost the opportunity to attack in the first gear. Later, after both sides adjusted their positions, St. Mary's College kicked off again and launched a second gear attack. Mike approached Oha again in the opponent's second gear offense. After some probing, he chose to take the initiative to crash into his opponent this time. Bang! The violent collision sound was accompanied by the exclamation of the audience outside the field. The two tackles fought in one place and began a competition of strength. It can be clearly felt that in this wrestling, Oha, who was using his backhand to exert force, was stronger than Mike in terms of strength. However, Mike relied on his extraordinary skills to use his elbows between the opponent's ribs and upper arms, making it difficult for the opponent to exert force. For a while, the two fought evenly. In this short confrontation, Mike also estimated that Oha's physique should be between 180 and 200. Of course, this is just Mike's guess, and judging from the situation, Oha has not yet learned to use this strength. On the other side, without Oha's cover, the quarterback of St. Mary's College was stopped again. Obviously, without the big guy to open the way, the charge tactics of St. Mary's College have lost their power. At this time, the center of the Melford football team took a break and chose to come over to help Mike. Next, under the attack of the center and Mike, Oha was decisively thrown to the ground. Beep. The quarterback of St. Mary's College once again lost another offensive opportunity because of being forced to stop for too long. As the offense of St. Mary's College stopped again, Coach Cotton on the sidelines also realized the seriousness of the problem. Looking at Oha, who fell near the sideline again and did nothing in this offense, Coach Cotton also complained to the referee again. "Hey, my players were treated roughly, didn't you see? Their behavior has constituted a defensive foul." Coach Cotton wanted to find a foul for the opponent to get another fourth gear offensive opportunity for his team. However, the referee looked at the strong Oha and shook his head slightly, indicating that Melford's defense did not foul this time. One thing to say here is that, because of the strong confrontation of rugby, the referee of each game will also adjust his penalty standards according to the actual situation on the field. If a player with a thin stature is knocked down by two opponents, most referees may give the opponent a foul penalty depending on the situation. However, Oha is too strong, and the conditions for him to trigger the opponent's foul will naturally increase. In a situation where the penalty can be called or not, Oha did not win the sympathy of the referee. At this time, Melford Middle School was able to think that letting Mike intercept Oha was indeed a good move. When Coach Cotton realized the seriousness of the problem, it was too late to change the tactics. In this case, if St. Mary's College still wants to win, the key lies in whether Oha can use his physical advantage to continue to help his quarterback and continue to score efficiently in the next game. In a way, the hope of St. Mary's College winning now rests on Oha. Seeing Oha getting up, Coach Cotton anxiously reminded him, "Michael, don't get entangled with the opponent. Your mission is to protect the quarterback." At this time, the two Mikes were standing very close. Without waiting for Big Michael to answer, Mike Quinn turned his head and asked in a puzzled tone, "Coach, are you talking to me?" Coach Cotton, who had learned about the opponent's information in advance, of course knew that there was also a Mike in the opponent's formation. Just listening to the teasing tone of Mike number 21, Coach Cotton was very speechless and said that he didn't want to talk to the other party. Big Mike's silly face also showed an anxious expression. Of course, he also wanted to help his quarterback to rush and score, but the opponent stuck to him like a sticky candy, making him unable to get away. Beep. The whistle of the third gear offense of St. Mary's College sounded. The quarterback of St. Mary's College, who was supposed to continue to rush, was blocked again at the back of the center line after the whistle sounded. After the two previous rounds of defense, the Melford players, who had tasted the sweetness, chose to take the initiative to move forward when the opponent attacked in the third gear. In the continuous frontal impact, the quarterback of St. Mary's College, who was holding the football, was forced to retreat little by little. The tactics of the Melford team at this moment were more like a pack of wolves tactics that gave up the retreat and only focused on attacking. Such an aggressive style of play also made the audience outside the field cheer continuously. If this continues, the high-spirited Melford Middle School is likely to get a safety score in the opponent's fourth gear attack. Coach Cotton, who was already restless, saw that the team's disadvantage was getting bigger and bigger and couldn't help but shout to Oha, "Michael, what are you waiting for? The team needs you." Infected by the coach's emotions, Oha's eyes instantly became fierce. He rushed towards Mike, who was defending on the opposite side. At this moment, he gave up thinking and just wanted to knock away the opponent and meet up with his teammates. Feeling the opponent's determination, Mike didn't think about passive defense this time. Physics tells us that the size of momentum depends on speed and mass. So Mike also picked up his speed and rushed towards his opponent. Bang! With a cry of surprise, both Mikes fell to the ground. Check the correct version on the 16-9 book forum. Beep. Until the end of the third offensive time of St. Mary's College, the two Mikes on the left sideline were unable to get up. The coaches of both sides saw that the situation was not right and all ran over. "Mike, how are you?" Coach George asked worriedly, and he was a little regretful in his heart that he let Mike defend the opponent's big guy. "It's okay, just a little stuffy." Mike took a breath and climbed up, holding his chest, feeling dizzy. If it weren't for the protective gear to absorb the shock, Mike was sure that he would have broken at least 2 ribs in the violent collision just now. It must be said that the strength of the big guy on the opposite side was really strong. On the other side, the big guy had tried several times, but couldn't get up. One of his arms was limp and drooping to the side, showing a twisted state. Tears and sweat slid down his face. Coach Cotton, who noticed the player's injury, quickly called the team doctor. After examination, Oha's right arm was dislocated from the shoulder and needed to be straightened and repaired in time. "I'm sorry, Coach. I failed your expectations." Oha, lying on the stretcher, had an expression of self-blame and unwillingness on his face. "It's okay, Michael, you've done a good job." Coach Cotton comforted the big guy and said, "It's just a game. Wait until you recover from your injury and we'll come back next year." Just at this time, Scene, who was holding a SLR, and his parents also came to the sidelines. They comforted Oha at the same time. In the end, accompanied by Scene's family, Oha went to the back for treatment. As Oha left the court due to injury, the referee looked at the side in surprise. Mike, who seemed to be fine for such a while. Then, he pulled out a yellow scarf and gave Mike a defensive foul. The coaches of both sides had no objection to this penalty. The actual situation is that with the exit of Oha from St. Mary's College, this penalty has no effect on the result of this game. Because of the previous rounds of confrontation, half of the fourth quarter had passed. 11 points difference, 6 minutes to catch up. Without Oha, even if St. Mary's College was given an extra chance to attack in the fourth gear, Coach Cotton could not think of any way to help the team win. Next, when Melford Middle School was no longer under pressure to win, Coach George also substituted Mike at the right time. Beep. As the game continued, St. Mary's College on the offensive end switched back to the 4-3-4 formation at the beginning. Coach Cotton's tactical change was not for winning, but to prevent the team from losing so badly in the last few minutes. However, Melford Middle School, which was in high spirits, did not give the opponent any chance. They relied on fierce confrontation and scored a safety on the defensive end. The total score of 43:30 was rewritten again. Beep. With the whistle of the whole game, Melford Middle School led by a large score and advanced to the top 10 in the state. After winning, Captain Aaron excitedly came to the sidelines and pulled Mike up to the middle of the field to accept the cheers of the crowd. Chapter 70: Jeff's emotional journey. In the middle of the field, the two coaches were shaking hands. "Congratulations on your victory and entering the top 10 in the state." Coach Cotton had a smile on his face, but he seemed to be a little dissatisfied with the loss of this game. "Also, congratulations on having an excellent player. The number 21 player will definitely become a big star in the professional arena in the future, as long as he is guided a little." Coach Cotton was unwilling to admit that the loss of this game was due to his tactical arrangement. He tried to attribute Melford's victory to the number 21 player. It was a bit like losing the battle, but not the battle. However, Coach George did not hear the sarcasm in the other party's words at all. He was very lucky to win this game. So Coach George also smiled and said, "Your number 74 is not bad either. He has that kind of talent and his future achievements in football will definitely not be low. The winner should have the temperament of a winner." Coach George appropriately carried out a wave of commercial mutual praise. Everyone likes to hear nice words, and Coach Cotton is no exception. Besides, he really regards Oher as his favorite disciple. Then, Coach Cotton's smile became more sincere. He suggested, "Why don't we arrange an invitational tournament next spring?" "Of course, I'd love to." Coach George agreed immediately. Unlike the Summer League Cup system, which has a tight schedule, the Spring Invitational Tournament has a more flexible schedule and is a performance-based tournament. The autonomy of the Invitational Tournament also determines that the strength gap between the two sides in each game will not be very large. Coach Cotton's invitation to the Melford football team for the spring tournament at this time can be regarded as a disguised recognition of the strength of the Melford football team. As the conversation between the two coaches ended, the game for the top 10 in the state also came to an end. On the sidelines, Mike, who had just finished an interview with reporter Jack according to the procedure, turned around and saw Regina with a bright smile. She acted as if nothing had happened before and greeted him enthusiastically. "Hi, Mike. Do you want to come to my house later? Just you and me?" At the same time, Regina's eyes were a little teasing. However, Mike has learned his lesson this time. This queen bee has a lot of thoughts, and it's not easy to take advantage of her. And compared to Regina, who is full of tricks, Mike prefers to play with the beautiful and sensible Karen and Lina. "Sorry, I have other plans this afternoon." Mike refused decisively. "That's a pity." Regina didn't seem disappointed. She smiled and gave Mike a kiss on the cheek and said familiarly, "When you are free next time, we will have a good chat." Under Regina's deliberate guidance, outsiders who don't know the truth may really think that she and Mike had something. The actual situation is that seeing Mike's popularity increase, Regina just wants to control him quickly to consolidate her position as the queen bee in the school. It can be said that Regina's current performance of letting bygones be bygones has a strong purpose. Showing goodwill to Mike is more like a transaction. Mike is clear in his mind. He doesn't want to be a tool for the other party, so he didn't get entangled with Regina. Turning around, he called George, who was idle on the side, and the two went to the locker room together. Regina's face darkened as she watched Mike's back without any reluctance. But after a while, she regained her previous beautiful appearance. Then, she also specially called the Sisters of the Devil Body group and left the playground together. Ever since she knew that Mike was a playboy, Regina kept a close eye on the other girls in the Devil Body group. After all, in addition to being a playboy, Mike has many other advantages. For example, his handsome face is very lethal to girls. Regina didn't want to be stabbed in the back by her little sisters before she could control Mike. In the afternoon, Mike, who had nothing to do at home, called Karen to invite her. The response he got was that the Devil Body group had an activity in the afternoon and the other party couldn't get away. Then, Mike, who was unwilling to be lonely, called Lina again. During this period, Lina behaved very well in front of her family and never showed her true colors. So her mother has gradually relaxed her supervision of her daughter. Seeing Lina coming again, Connie secretly gave Mike a thumbs up, then found a lame excuse and left the house. The two young people in their prime had enough space to be alone. Charm attribute +8, flexibility attribute +5, constitution attribute +1. After an afternoon of hard work, Mike's strength has improved again. Dinner time, at the Cooper's table. Perhaps because of the team's victory today, Mary prepared a large table of rich food. George, Mary, I have good news. After everyone sat down at the table, George and his wife spoke at the same time. You go first, George gestured gentlemanly. Mary did not refuse, and after organizing her words, she said, at the church, Aunt Susan resigned from her assistant job due to health reasons, so now I'm Jeff's assistant. So, why is Pastor Jeff in our house? George asked. Yes, there was one more person at the Cooper's dinner table this time. George was originally going to ask about the other party's situation while eating. Now that his wife has mentioned this, George doesn't mind asking the doubts in advance. Mary looked at the corner of the dining table and saw Pastor Jeff, who was full of low pressure and didn't know how to start. Pastor Jeff was wearing a wrinkled suit, and his already thin figure looked even more decadent. At this moment, he was holding a silk scarf and blowing his nose constantly, and his expression looked extremely pitiful. Seeing that everyone's eyes were on him, Pastor Jeff waved his hands weakly, showing a smile that was uglier than crying, and said, first of all, the reason why Mary was able to get the church job is because she performed well in the last church dinner. Moreover, Mary is also a devout Christian. George didn't care much about how his wife became an assistant. Seeing that Pastor Jeff was off topic, he immediately reminded, so, why are you in my house? Who knew that when George asked this question again, Pastor Jeff actually lowered his head and cried. Mary patted her husband, as if blaming him for not understanding her expression. Fortunately, Pastor Jeff didn't shut himself up for long. The snot that was about to flow to his mouth made him take the next step. Check out the correct version on the 16:9 book forum. The white silk scarf that blew his nose was blown up. In the disgusted eyes of little Sheldon, Pastor Jeff said, sorry then, he continued, it's not George's fault, it's all my own fault. As Pastor Jeff told the story, the matter became clear. The matter was probably that, because of Selina's departure, Pastor Jeff didn't want to stay at home alone, which would make him feel sad. So, he thought of staying at Cooper's house for a few days to relieve his sadness. Looking at Pastor Jeff's reaction, Mike was a little suspicious whether the man in black had been to the other party's house and brainwashed him. Obviously, when they met last time, Pastor Jeff's feelings for Selina didn't seem that deep. And it can be clearly felt that in this new live-out couple, the man is accommodating the woman. Logically speaking, this unequal way of getting along will make one of the parties very tired. Now that Selina is gone, Pastor Jeff should be relieved. Well, your experience is indeed very regrettable. George didn't know much about Pastor Jeff's love life, so he could only express sympathy first. Then, he said in the tone of a person who had experienced it, I told you a long time ago that the most important thing between husband and wife is honesty. You should confess to Selina earlier that you are not a rich second generation. Hearing George's persuasion, Pastor Jeff burst into tears again. What's wrong? Did I say something wrong again? George asked in surprise. No, you are not wrong. Pastor Jeff said intermittently, yes, it was Selina. She drove away the red sports car when she left. The huge bill for that car will not be paid off for another year. After that, Pastor Jeff cried even more sadly. Judging from the situation, the reason why he was so sad was probably because of the huge debt in the bank. Then, Pastor Jeff, who kept crying and couldn't be persuaded, was left alone to deal with his emotions. At the dinner table, Mary turned her head to look at her husband, adjusted her tone, and asked, "George, do you have any good news to tell us? Because of the team's performance, the school has raised my salary, 200 yuan more per week." George responded, "Because the football team won one after another, George's status among the school teachers has been greatly improved." The principal also planned an independent sports office for the football team coach. This is a great honor for George. But after being interrupted by Pastor Jeff, George's mood to share the good news with his family seemed not as excited as before. "Really? That's great." Mary was very supportive and happy about her husband's salary increase. At this moment, she has not lost the temperament of a housewife, and her emotions are still habitually based on her husband. Seeing his wife's reaction, George smiled. Although he didn't say it, he actually enjoyed the feeling of being the head of the family. Some people are happy, and some are sad. Soon, dinner time is over. Mary, who didn't bother to clean up the tableau, first went back to the room to take out the list, wanting to make a temporary resting place for Pastor Jeff on the sofa. As she was about to leave, Grandma Connie looked at Pastor Jeff, who was sitting alone and depressed, and suggested, "Jeff, do you want to go for a drive? You drive." Grandma Connie was kind-hearted. As someone who had experienced it, she knew that if she wanted Jeff to get out of the shadow of his last relationship quickly, diverting his attention was a good way. Chapter 71 Mathematics Test. As Grandma Connie and Pastor Jeff left, the atmosphere at the table quieted down. Looking at George, who was anxious to leave, Coach George suddenly said, "By the way, George, I have something to inform you. Ms. Ingram is going to give you a math test this Wednesday. If you can't pass it, you will be disqualified from playing in the football league next Monday." "Are you serious?" George looked at his father with a serious expression in surprise, and had a bad feeling. Of course. George said he could do nothing to help his eldest son's resistance. He explained, "This is Ms. Ingram's right to apply directly to the school, and I can't do anything about it." In fact, in George's heart, he didn't understand the school's approach this time. "It's over." George, who got the answer, slumped in his chair, as if he had lost his soul. Then he complained, "How can they do this to me? I helped the team enter the top 10 in the state." Yes, in George's heart, the school's math surprise test was specifically aimed at him. If it were other requirements, in order to participate in the football league, George might have chosen to fight. Only in learning, there was no possibility of struggle at all. Little George knew his level. Since he entered middle school, he had never passed the math test. Talent was not here, and hard work was useless. Just when little George was in pain, little Sheldon on the opposite side found a unique angle and analyzed. The data shows that little George's performance on the court has less than 5% impact on the team's victory or defeat. The school football team can still operate normally without you. So, you don't need to blame yourself for not being able to participate in the game next Monday. At this time, little Sheldon made such a statement. It is really hard to say whether he wants to comfort little George or want to ridicule him. The only thing that can be confirmed is that little George does not want to hear these words now. He blushed and retorted, "What do you know? Football is a team sport. As a wide receiver in the team, I have a share of all the honors the team has won." In order to enhance his credibility, little George continued to add, "If you don't believe it, you can ask Mike." Mike nodded after hearing this. In fact, wide receivers have a strong tactical position in football games. The Melford football team only made the wide receivers in the team seem dispensable because of special strategic needs. From the side, George made a great sacrifice for the team's victory. Facing George's rebuttal, Sheldon shrugged indifferently, as if he did not agree with George's statement. "Damn it." George was depressed, roared, and said enviously, "If I can also understand the knowledge that the teacher teaches in class, it would be great." The source of all George's troubles now is because of poor study. If possible, he also wants to be like Sheldon and Mike, and become a top student who studies like drinking water. If you use all the time you usually spend reading flower magazines to study, your grades will not be as bad as they are now. Sheldon ruthlessly exposed George's excuse. "Shut up," George scolded Sheldon, a little angry. "Be quiet." Seeing that his two sons were about to quarrel again, George stopped them in time. "Just be quiet for a while. George glared at his youngest son, then looked at little George and comforted him. It's not the end of the world, little George. What you need to consider most now is how to pass the test on Wednesday. What can I do? Little George was desperate and continued to play badly. Maybe you don't. George smiled and said meaningfully, but don't forget, there are two smart people in the room. George's meaning was already very clear, that is, to let little George ask for help from little Sheldon and Mike. He thought that with the help of two good students, little George might have a chance to pass this test. But before little George could make a move, little Sheldon took the lead in refusing. I don't want to waste my time on an upright ape that has not yet evolved completely. Little Sheldon, as always, expressed doubts about little George's IQ. Compared to teaching upright apes to count, little Sheldon would rather play with his toy train in his spare time. How about a toy car? George offered a price in an induced way. What? Hearing about toys, little Sheldon was really interested. If you can help George pass his math test on Wednesday, I'll give you a toy car. George promised. Can I go to the mall and pick out the style I like? Sheldon asked carefully. A perfect version at 1619 Book Bar. Of course. George, who knew his son's interests, showed a satisfied look on his face. Then, he turned to Mike and asked, what reward do you want? A brand new football, how about it? No. Mike said generously that helping George pass the test was equivalent to helping the football team, and he didn't need any reward. The actual situation is that after possessing the moonlight characteristic that can continuously enhance physical fitness, Mike has lost most of his enthusiasm for the sport of football. The reason why he joined the football team was that he valued this highly competitive sport and could help him improve his physical fitness quickly. Now, after the initial bonus period, it is very difficult for Mike to improve his physical fitness through exercise. Mike's most real thought now is that instead of hanging out with a group of men every day, it would be more cost effective to do more double sports with Karen or Lina. George, who didn't know Mike's real thoughts, thought that he was considering the team. So, he said with relief, okay, your reward will be temporarily with me. When you want anything, you can tell me. Mike nodded without commenting, without further explanation. Anyway, he didn't want to ask George for a reward. On the other side, Mrs. Eyes turned, came to Mike, grabbed his arm and shook it, and said coquettishly, Mike, if you get the reward, can you give me a pink ash? Looking at the little girl's expectant eyes, Mike asked puzzledly, Ash? What is that? Ash is the eldest princess among the 12 ballet princesses. Recently, she has released a pink Barbie costume, which is very beautiful. Mrs. Eyes sparkled and she explained. Girls like Mrs. Age are just the age to like pink and bright Barbie dolls. Mike took a while to understand that Missy was talking about a toy Barbie doll. Then, he naturally agreed to Mrs. request. He solemnly promised that he would give the other party a pink Aizu immediately after getting the reward share. What are we waiting for? Let's study quickly. Missy cheered. She had never been so enthusiastic about learning. Of course, Missy was the supervisor of the study this time, and the one who really needed to learn was the bitter-faced little George. The family had already planned the study plan for little George without asking for the consent of the person concerned. Chapter 72 Teaching. In George's room, he was sitting at the desk, pulling his hair in distress. Next to him, Sheldon was explaining math problems seriously. The temptation of a toy train was enough for Sheldon to endure George's stupidity. Behind the two, Missy, who had vowed before, was now holding a stuffed toy and pestering Mike to chat. The little girl was only interested in supervising George's study for 3 minutes. After all, for Missy, the gift that had not yet been received was not attractive at all compared to the handsome Mike. Next to the desk, Sheldon explained his solution ideas in detail and asked confidently, how is it? Do you understand? George looked at the math problems in the book and responded weakly, probably, maybe. I didn't understand. After saying that, George blinked his clear eyes. It's not that he didn't want to work hard. It's just that George looked at the exercises in the book, just like listening to the Book of Heaven, and felt dizzy. If there were no one else, George would want to take out the magazine under the desk to refresh himself. Such a simple question, and I explained it in such detail. How could you not understand it? Little Sheldon was a little skeptical about life. Then, he looked into George's eyes, and he saw stupidity in those eyes. Sure enough, it was too difficult to teach upright apes to count. Mike, come and have a look. This is also your task. Out of his obsession with toy cars, little Sheldon chose to seek help off-site. American public schools advocate happy education, and the difficulty of the courses is not too high. Mike was also a little curious at this time. While little George couldn't learn the exercises in the textbook, he stepped forward and observed Sheldon's problem-solving ideas first, and pointed out, "Sheldon, the problem-solving ideas you proposed are too complicated. Little George just wants to cope with this math test, and he needs simpler and clearer problem-solving steps." In Mike's view, little Sheldon's problem-solving ideas seemed to be trying to explain to little George the meaning of the existence of the number 1. And little George now only needs to know that 1 + 1 = 2, and there is no need to explore why that 1 exists. Little Sheldon was obviously a little dissatisfied with Mike's statement. He said, "Okay, I'll leave it to you. I'll watch from the side." Okay, Mike nodded. Mike knew that his IQ was not as good as that of little Sheldon. However, he was still confident in teaching little George arithmetic. The question in the exercise book was just a simple binary operation. It was easy to get the answer by plugging in the formula and calculating. Mike, who had an idea in mind, demonstrated the simplest steps of solving the problem that he had summarized to little George. Then, he asked, "How about it? Do you understand it?" Little George fell into silence. After a long time, he stammered, "I seem to understand a little. Or you can explain it again. Maybe I will understand it." Little George could vaguely feel that the method Mike explained was simpler than the problem-solving ideas that little Sheldon talked about, but he still couldn't understand it. "Okay, let's try another question." Mike didn't realize the seriousness of the problem yet. He found a question of the same type and continued to demonstrate. Mike thought, the solution formula is there. As long as George is more familiar with this type of question, he will naturally know the steps to solve the problem after memorizing the formula. This is a process of practice makes perfect. After checking a problem again, Mike asked, "How is it? Did you understand this time?" This time, the only answer for him was silence. Mike looked up at George. Well, he has got the answer from the other's clear eyes. The other party still didn't understand. Let's change to the same type of question. Mike still didn't give up and continued to look for examples. Until he explained the same type of question 5 times in a row, he was still greeted by George's lifeless eyes. After the torture of the exercises, George's eyes were almost drawing circles. This situation made Mike and Sheldon look at each other, and they both saw helplessness in each other's eyes. Sure enough, it is still too difficult to teach upright apes to count. Just when the 2 high IQ talents were also silent, George moved his neck and made a clicking sound. Then, he asked curiously, "Mike, why don't you talk anymore? I'm almost done." Faced with George's desire for knowledge, Mike smiled awkwardly and said, "It's getting late today and you're tired. Let's continue tomorrow." The actual situation is that George has not been able to learn such a simple math problem for such a long time. It is an impossible task to get his math score to a passing level within 2 days. Check out the correct version in 16,191 book 1 bar. Yes, Mike has given up. As Mike left, only George and Sheldon were left in the room. Because of his obsession with the toy train, Sheldon has not given up yet. He asked, "George, how about I tell you about my solution?" When Mike explains the problem, George may be able to understand a little, but when Sheldon explains the problem, it is like listening to a foreign language to George. So, little George refused and said, "No, I." Just as he was about to refuse, little George suddenly saw his feet under the table, and suddenly he smiled and said, "I have learned it." This time, it was little Sheldon's turn to be surprised. "Did you really learn it?" "Yes, just watch me during the test." Little George exuded a confident glow. Then, he urged impatiently, "I still need to review it myself. You should leave quickly." "Okay, I hope I can get my own train." Little Sheldon muttered, and was also happy and peaceful, and turned around, and left little George's room. In little Sheldon's mind, as long as he could get a toy train, He didn't care how little George learned the math knowledge. At the same time, a small car with high beams on was driving slowly on the road. Grandma Connie, who was sitting in the co-pilot, said, "It's dark. There are not many cars on the road. You can speed up." As a local pastor, Jeff is not very old, but his personality is like an antique. Although he bought a red sports car under Selina's urging, he had never driven it before. "No, I have to pay attention to traffic rules. There is an intersection ahead, and the red light will turn on soon." Pastor Jeff, who was driving for the first time, was still a novice. At this moment, he felt both fresh and nervous. Seeing Pastor Jeff's hesitation and about to miss the green light, Grandma Connie ordered, "The green light will turn on in 3 seconds. There is still enough time. Speed up and rush over." Grandma Connie was almost sick of Pastor Jeff's cautious driving style. Her current behavior was intermittent madness. "Is it okay?" Pastor Jeff asked in a low voice. In fact, there was a beast in his heart that needed to be released. After all, his wife had just run away, and his money was gone. This tragic experience required him to vent. "Listen to me, step on the accelerator." Grandma Connie shouted loudly without thinking about the big deal. While shouting, Pastor Jeff stepped on the accelerator hard. Amidst the shouts, the car rushed through the traffic light intersection at a high speed of 20 miles per hour. Chapter 73 Pastor Jeff's emotional journey continued. The car stopped at the side of the road. Pastor Jeff's hands holding the steering wheel were still shaking slightly. The experience of speeding at the intersection just now made his adrenaline surge, and he has not yet completely calmed down. "I didn't miss the green light just now?" Pastor Jeff, who had recovered, asked uncertainly. "Who knows?" Grandma Connie said indifferently. "Did someone come to arrest us during this time?" Pastor Jeff breathed a sigh of relief and prayed to God for forgiveness. When he drove through the intersection just now, he was too nervous and didn't notice the change of the traffic light at all. Therefore, from a probabilistic point of view, Pastor Jeff has a 50% chance of running a red light. For a devout Christian, any mistakes are not allowed. Just when Grandma Connie couldn't stand the delay and was about to exchange driving rights with Pastor Jeff, at the fork in the road, a traffic policeman pushing a motorcycle sounded the alarm. "Got." As Pastor Jeff prayed, the car window was knocked. In the gloomy atmosphere, Pastor Jeff didn't roll down the window until he finished a round of prayer. Under the light of the street lamp, Pastor Jeff looked out, and his eyes met with the female traffic policeman who was bending over and had long golden hair. Time seemed to have stopped at this moment. Ahem. Grandma Connie coughed lightly, interrupting the charming atmosphere, and asked, "Excuse me, did we violate the traffic regulations?" "No." The female traffic police shook her head, making the atmosphere relaxed. Then, she explained, "Because of the strange speed of this car before, I came to check the situation. It turned out that the other party was just doing routine work." This discovery completely relaxed Pastor Jeff's tense nerves. "Please show me your driver's license." The female traffic police looked like a business person. "Oh, Oklahoma, okay." Pastor Jeff took out his driver's license and handed it over, saying, "My name is Jeff. Actually, I'm a pastor at the church." "I know you, Pastor. I go to church every week." The female traffic police checked the driver's license, handed it back, and asked, "What happened to the car? Do you need help?" Pastor Jeff explained a little embarrassedly, "The car is fine. I just stopped here to rest." "Okay, don't stay at the intersection for too long. Pay attention to driving safety," the female traffic police reminded. "Understood, sir." Pastor Jeff nodded and started the car. The car swayed for a few meters and stopped again. Under the curious eyes of the female traffic police, Pastor Jeff stuck his head out and asked with a thick face, "Well, I just want to know, it's so late, why haven't you got off work yet?" When traffic police are on duty, they usually act in pairs. In addition, it's so late now. The other side is a female traffic police, still on duty alone on the road, and the situation is obviously a bit wrong. "Actually, this is my first time to work today, and I just happen to have some problems with my car, so I've been here until now. But it's not a big deal," the female traffic police explained optimistically. Pastor Jeff looked at the motorcycle pushed by the female traffic police, and sure enough, the front tire of the motorcycle was sunk. so he quickly asked, "Do you need help?" "No, I can handle this trouble myself," the female traffic police said cheerfully. "Well, good luck to you." Pastor Jeff, who was rejected, started the car again. Grandma Connie, who was sitting in the passenger seat, looked at Pastor Jeff, who had been absent-minded since saying goodbye to the female traffic police, and reminded him, "If I were you, I would go back to her now." Pastor Jeff's current situation is obviously that he has fallen in love. "No, I can't do this." Pastor Jeff refused. "Why?" asked Grandma Connie. "Is it because you are a pastor that God has deprived you of the right to pursue happiness?" "That's not the case." Pastor Jeff was entangled. "It's just that I don't know her name yet, and I don't know if she is single. After all, she is so perfect." Yes, perfect. When Pastor Jeff looked at each other just now, it was like seeing an angel. He had never felt that kind of wonderful feeling with Serena before. "Believe me, she is definitely still single. You have a great chance to win her over," Grandma Connie said with certainty. In fact, Grandma Connie was also guessing based on experience. The look in the eyes of the female traffic policeman looking at Jeff before revealed a lot of special feelings. Of course, Grandma Connie, who likes to watch the fun and not mind the trouble, is only responsible for matchmaking. Even if it is wrong in the end, it will only be Pastor Jeff who is embarrassed. Moreover, having another strange emotional experience can also help Pastor Jeff get out of Serena's shadow earlier. "Are you sure?" Pastor Jeff was obviously moved by what Grandma Connie said. Of course, in terms of relationships, Grandma has a lot of experience. Grandma Connie continued to persuade, "Go, don't miss this opportunity, otherwise you will regret it." A correct version in the 16-9 book forum. Pastor Jeff just looked anxious. In fact, he is not yet 30. At this moment, he was even more bewitched by Grandma Connie, and was a little excited. "Okay, I'll go now. May God bless me." Pastor Jeff seemed to have made up his mind. After stabilizing the car, he pushed the car door and walked down. "What should I do?" "Maybe you can send her home first, and then ask her out for a drink," Grandma Connie said, smiling and waving. "Good luck, boy." After receiving the instructions, Pastor Jeff raised his head and chest, straightened his clothes, and sorted out his emotions, and turned back to the fork in the road. There, the figure of the female traffic police pushing the car had not gone far. Grandma Connie, who had done another good thing, moved to the driver's seat. She was in a good mood, and was ready to see the results of her matchmaking. Who knew? When she turned around, she saw a face on the car window. "Jeff, why are you back again?" Grandma Connie, who was startled, asked in a bad tone. "You know, it's very scary to see a face suddenly appear on the window at night. I came back to ask you to tell Mary that I won't go to her house tonight." Pastor Jeff forced a smile and said embarrassedly. He also knew that his behavior just now was a bit abrupt. I know, you go quickly." Grandma Connie waved to drive the other party away. After the shock just now, Grandma Connie's heart is still pounding. Even the smile on Pastor Jeff's face now feels a bit creepy to her. Pastor Jeff saw Grandma Connie's reaction, smiled awkwardly again, and then left. This time, after Pastor Jeff left, Grandma Connie was not in the mood to care about the other party's emotional life. She drove the car and returned home like the wind. Mike. As soon as he entered the house, Grandma Connie shouted loudly, "What's wrong?" Mike walked out of the room. He found that Grandma Connie was a little bit wrong after going out. Her face was too pale. "Nothing." Grandma Connie took a breath and said, "Okay, go back and rest." "Why is it so strange?" Mike muttered and went back to the room. In fact, he didn't know that Grandma Connie was using the method of washing her eyes to forget the previous shock. Chapter 74 Honesty and Lies. Time flies and it is Wednesday. As Ms. Ingram walked into the classroom with the math test paper, the atmosphere in the class became tense. Some poor students who usually like to play around in the class turned bitter. The representative one is little George. He is now lowering his head and shaking his legs uneasily, as if he has ADHD. Of course, there are some alternative students who are not only not nervous, but also seem a little excited. The representative one is little Sheldon. At this moment, he has prepared his answer pen, and the whole person looks like a soldier going to the battlefield. "Don't be nervous, everyone," This is just a simple test. Ms. Ingram looked around, staring at the students who were crowded in the last row, and said, "Students in the back row, please move forward, one table per person. There are many empty seats in the front row of the classroom. Even if one person has a table, there is still room." When the students were adjusting their seats, Ms. Ingram's tone became much more severe, and she warned, "The test results this time will not be included in the total score, so don't worry too much." Before everyone could breathe a sigh of relief, Ingram continued, "Of course, don't cheat and let me find out. Otherwise, I will report it to the school truthfully and record it in your files." With Ingram's warning, the students in the back row quickly adjusted their positions. Unfortunately, because George was a step slower, the good seats in the class were occupied by others. He could only take his stationery and reluctantly sit in the first row, on the other side of Sheldon. After everything was quiet, Ms. Ingram began to hand out test papers one by one. This was Mike's second test since he came to school. After he got the test paper, he didn't rush to answer the questions, but first glanced over the test paper as a whole. Fortunately, except for the last two big questions that used calculus, the other questions in this set of papers were very simple. Mike estimated and felt that he should be able to get a full score. With a clear mind, he turned over the test paper and answered the first question in an orderly manner. On the other side, Sheldon, who also got the test paper, also seemed very calm. This set of math test questions was not difficult for him. But half an hour later, when Sheldon finished the previous questions and came to the last two big questions, he couldn't help frowning. The math progress of the 11th grade has not yet involved the application of calculus, and these two big questions are obviously beyond the scope. Sheldon thought about it and was about to raise his hand to indicate to the teacher that the questions were beyond the scope. However, his peripheral vision happened to see that Mike on the side was also answering the last two questions. As a proud student, Sheldon didn't want to lose to anyone in learning, so he suppressed the urge to raise his hand. So he took out the draft paper and began to check the last two big questions with his own problem-solving ideas. Another half an hour passed, and Sheldon, after filling up the draft paper, finally deduced the answers to the last two questions with his extraordinary IQ. Afterwards, he copied the answers onto the test paper with a sense of accomplishment, and then looked at Mike next to him. However, Mike, who was answering the questions seriously before, was now lying on the table. Judging from the indentations on his face, he should have slept for a while. Little Sheldon, who regarded Mike as his only opponent, shook his head regretfully. From little Sheldon's point of view, he thought that Mike gave up early because he couldn't do the last two big questions. After enjoying the pleasure of defeating his opponent unilaterally, little Sheldon had time to look at other students. Witnessing other students' distressed looks when they couldn't do the questions, little Sheldon also felt a great sense of superiority. After he looked around the classroom, he suddenly found that little George, who was sitting on the other side of him, had lifted one leg while Ms. Ingram was not paying attention. Little George wore a new pair of flat shoes today. The point is that little Sheldon saw densely written mathematical formulas on the bottom of the flat shoes. This is cheating. Little Sheldon realized what his brother was doing. Little Sheldon, who was ashamed of George's behavior, immediately looked at Ms. Ingram, who was dozing off on the podium, and wanted to report George's cheating to her. However, he suddenly thought of what Ms. Ingram had said before, the serious consequences of cheating after being discovered, and hesitated for a while. After thinking again and again, little Sheldon decided to personally stop his brother from cheating without alarming the teacher. Little George. Little George, little Sheldon called softly. Little George, who was indulging in cheating, was startled by the shouting. He quickly put his legs down and pretended that nothing had happened. The set of movements can be said to be very smooth. Of course, if he didn't have sweat on his head, he would behave more naturally. Then, George wiped the sweat off his head, secretly glanced at the podium, and found that Ingram was dozing off. He turned his head angrily after a false alarm and asked, "Sheldon, what's wrong with you?" "Shoes," little Sheldon reminded in a low voice. "What, shoes?" Little George continued to play dumb. "Shoes, you are cheating." Seeing that the other party refused to admit it, little Sheldon was also a little excited. Just as the two brothers were whispering, Ms. Ingram on the podium suddenly said, "Be quiet," a perfect version of the book in 16:9. Little Sheldon, who tried to cover up for others for the first time in an exam, couldn't help feeling guilty. He looked up carefully, and his eyes just met the teacher's eyes. Then, the frightened little Sheldon, like a child who had done something wrong, quickly lowered his head again. "What's wrong, little Sheldon?" Ms. Ingram saw that little Sheldon's reaction was a little strange, so she asked. "No, it's okay." Little Sheldon shook his head nervously. "Well, answer the questions well. This test is very important to you," Ms. Ingram reminded him implicitly. Then, after she looked around the classroom with her eyes, she dozed off on the podium again. Next, Sheldon, who dared not to do anything else, could only watch George cross his legs again. Seeing his brother cheating made Sheldon feel very uncomfortable. In particular, he felt a little guilty for covering up for him. Finally, an hour later, Sheldon ended his torment. The test time was over, and Ms. Ingram collected the test papers one by one. After she left, the class wailed and lamented the difficulty of this test. The relaxed Sheldon looked at Mike, who had just gotten up and rubbed his face with sleep marks, and couldn't help asking, "Mike, how did you do in this test?" "It's okay, the questions are not difficult," Mike said casually. "How can it be not difficult? The last two questions are obviously difficult." Sheldon was surprised by Mike's reaction, and then realized that the other party might not have counted the last two questions that were beyond the scope. Just when Sheldon was lost in thought, little George, who had prepared in advance and had done a lot of questions, came over and said, "Yes, the questions this time are really simple. I feel I can get a good grade." Hearing what little George said, little Sheldon turned his head suddenly and accused, "Little George, why did you change into a new pair of shoes?" Fortunately, little Sheldon didn't say the word cheating. "None of your business," little George said hard, and then in the face of little Sheldon's angry expression, he took the stationery and walked to the back row. But when he passed by little Sheldon, he whispered to remind him, "Don't forget, you are also my accomplice." The accomplice in little George's mouth refers to the fact that little Sheldon discovered his cheating behavior. Not only did he not report it in time, but also helped to cover it up. Little Sheldon, who wanted to say something else, heard his brother's words, as if he was caught in the middle, and could only watch the other party go away with hatred. Chapter 75, War Between Brothers. At the dinner time at the Cooper's house, Sheldon was still struggling with the fact that he had not reported George's cheating in time during the exam today. Until the end of dinner, George left the table happily. Sheldon looked at the other person's back, hesitated for a long time, and finally said, "I have a question. Did you encounter any trouble at school? Someone bullied you?" Shelly Mary guessed with some sensitivity. "No." Sheldon shook his head, and then said, if. What would you do if you found someone made a mistake?" Seeing that Sheldon was not in trouble, Mary immediately lost interest in the current topic, and she began to busy herself with cleaning up the table. George, on the other hand, became very interested in this issue. He talked about his own experience. The topic came to the time when George was a college assistant. He was still very young, but because he discovered that the head coach had accepted bribes, he chose to expose the other party to the school. Of course, the result was not ideal. The head coach at that time did not receive any punishment, but George was expelled from the school for his act of informing. George wanted to use his life experience to tell Sheldon that when everyone turns a blind eye to a mistake, he should not be the first to make a mistake. Mary, who was cleaning the table, heard her husband talking about the unfair treatment he had suffered that year, and hugged him distressedly. "It's okay, everything is over." George smiled generously. George is now very satisfied with his life. Because of the team's performance, he has been valued by the school, and most importantly, his salary has also been increased accordingly. Therefore, he has been relieved of the unfair treatment of the year. "Very good. Your opinion is that I should not meddle in other people's business." Little Sheldon extracted the key points from George's words. Then, he looked at the next target. "Grandma, what will you do?" Grandma Connie, who was sitting opposite, took a sip of beer slowly and said casually, "It depends on my mood. If I'm in a good mood, I will watch the fun on the side. If I'm in a bad mood, I will make a decision to make my mood better. Well, what Grandma Connie said is a bit subjective, and little Sheldon can't reach that level for a while. He thought for a moment, turned to look at Mike sitting next to him, and continued to ask, "What about you, Mike? What will you do?" Mike said indifferently, "My opinion is similar to that of Grandma Connie. If the other party's mistakes do not affect me, then I will wait and see. Of course, if the other party's mistakes have affected me, then I will fundamentally solve the problem." Mike's answer was very smooth and subjective, like an extension of Grandma Connie's answer. After collecting everyone's opinions, little Sheldon was a little confused. Obviously, the answers of Mike and the other two were somewhat different from what little Sheldon expected. In the cognition of little Sheldon, no matter who it is, if they make a mistake, they should be punished. The opinions of Mike and the other two were more like muddying the water. Little Sheldon, with a stern face, left the table. He wanted to go back to his room, to sort out his thoughts. When passing by the door of little George, little Sheldon was still giving himself a psychological hint. Little George's cheating was his own business, and I was not his accomplice. I just need to take care of myself. Little Sheldon tried to convince himself that, even if George could pass the math test by cheating, he would still reveal his true level in the next test. So, cheating once would not affect anything. However, the more Sheldon tried to convince himself as he walked to the door of his room, the more he felt conflicted. Finally, he stopped, turned around and strode towards George's room. Pushing open the door, little Sheldon stood at the door and said seriously, "Little George, I saw you cheating on this test. So what?" Little George leaned on the pillow, holding a magazine in his hand, and said indifferently, "Don't forget, you also helped me cover up in the test. If you expose me, I will also expose the fact that you deceived Ingram. I'm not your accomplice. I will explain the situation to Ms. Ingram." Little Sheldon said, mentally ready to expose little George. "Really? I'm so scared." Little George smiled, not afraid at all. "Where's the evidence?" Hearing this, little Sheldon looked around the room and found that he couldn't find the new pair of flat shoes at all. Obviously, little George had been prepared and had hidden the evidence of his cheating in advance. That's why he is so calm now. "What do you think? If there is no evidence, I can sue you for defamation." Little George shook his legs proudly. He was very happy to see little Sheldon's face. Despicable little Sheldon glared at little George, left the other's room angrily, and closed the door heavily. However, before little George could be proud for long, little Sheldon's shout came from outside the door. "Mom, little George is hiding in the room again, peeking at flower magazines." Damn it. Little George cursed inwardly, and wanted to hide the magazine in his hand anxiously. With the sound of hurried footsteps, Mary, wearing a pair of dishwashing gloves, violently pushed open the door. "Little George, how many times have I told you that you are not old enough to read the fancy magazine? Hand it over to me." A correct version in 1619 book bar. "I swear to God, I didn't." Little George pretended to be innocent. "Sheldon wants to frame me." Little Sheldon, who was waiting at the door to watch the show, reminded him, "The magazine is hidden under the pillow." Obviously, between the two sons, Mary is more willing to believe her younger son. She stared at little George and urged, "Hurry up, take it out. Don't let me do it." Seeing that he couldn't get away, little George could only reluctantly take out the fancy magazine from under the pillow and hand it over to Mary. "Don't let me find out next time. Otherwise, I will ask your father to come and talk to you." After getting the magazine, Mary warned little George and left the room. Facts have proved that the smile will not disappear. It just moved from little George's face to little Sheldon's face. The bad guy was punished, and justice was served. Little Sheldon, who had watched a good show at the door, finally felt comfortable. He looked at the annoyed little George again with the attitude of a winner, and then walked towards his room proudly. On the other side, Mike, who returned to Connor's grandmother's house, unexpectedly received a call from Katie. On the phone, Katie told Mike about the trivialities of her life during this period of time, like a friend. Among them, she said sadly that she regretted breaking off her friendship with the punk girl Janice before. She also said that she wanted to repair the relationship with the other party, but she didn't know how to do it. Mike didn't know the specific situation of the matter, so he didn't rush to give advice, but just comforted the other party a few words. Katie, who was comforted, felt much better. Then, she asked Mike about the mathematical Olympiad, and she didn't know whether she should participate. Now is the critical period for Katie to establish her own power in the Devil Body group, and she really can't spare any extra time. Of course, deep in her heart, she still wants to join the school's mathematical Olympiad team. For Katie's wavering thoughts, Mike can only persuade the other party to stick to her heart. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.